Good morning. Welcome to a special edition of Breakfast on BBC News.
A nation mourns following the death of Queen Elizabeth II. Her Majesty died yesterday at Balmoral, bringing to an end a 70-year reign.
The Queen's eldest son, now King Charles III, was at her bedside. He'll return to London later today.
Tributes have been paid from around the world as hundreds of mourners gather at Buckingham Palace.
It's Friday, the 9th of September. You're watching a special edition of BBC Breakfast following the death of Her Majesty the Queen.
Britain's longest-serving monarch passed away yesterday at age 96 at Balmoral Castle, the Scottish retreat which Her Majesty had visited since she was a girl.
The news was confirmed in a statement from the palace at 6:30 p.m. after the Queen's 4 children, including the new King, Charles III, had travelled to Balmoral.
On today's programme, we'll be remembering Her Majesty's life and legacy and speaking to those who knew and loved her.
We'll bring you the latest reaction from Balmoral to Buckingham Palace and across the Commonwealth. First, our royal correspondent, Daniella Ralph, has been looking back at the final days and weeks of the Queen's life.
The final images we have, Queen Elizabeth II still carrying out duties into her final days. On Tuesday, at Balmoral, she welcomed the new Prime Minister. These photos, the record of her last official engagement, bringing to an end 7 decades of service. Yesterday afternoon at Aberdeen Airport, several senior members of the royal family arrived to be with the Queen. The Duke of Cambridge drove the Duke of York and Earl and Countess of Wessex to Balmoral. Prince Charles, the new king, was already there with his wife and his sister, Princess Anne. Harry, the Duke of Sussex, arrived separately later in the evening. Here in the UK this week with his wife for a number of charity events, Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, did not accompany him to Scotland. At 6:30, in a statement of just 26 words, Buckingham Palace announced the Queen had died peacefully earlier in the afternoon. As is tradition, the statement was attached to the palace gates by 2 footmen, as tribute to Britain's longest reigning monarch began.
Queen Elizabeth II was the rock on which modern Britain was built. Our country has grown and flourished under her reign. She was the very spirit of Great Britain, and that spirit will endure. She has been our longest ever reigning monarch. It's an extraordinary achievement to have presided with such dignity and grace for 70 years. And with the passing of the second Elizabethan age, we usher in a new era in the magnificent history of our great country, exactly as Her Majesty would have wished, by saying the words, "God save the King."
And heartfelt words too from the leader of the opposition.
For the vast majority of us, the late Queen has been simply the Queen, the only Queen, above all else, our Queen. As we mourn her loss, we should also treasure her life, our longest serving and greatest ever monarch. Above the clashes of politics, she stood not for what the nation fought over, but what it agreed upon.
Cheered by onlookers, one of the Queen's last royal engagements was in July, with her daughter Princess Anne opening a new state-of-the-art hospice in Berkshire. But these kinds of visits had become rare over the past year, as the Queen relied on her walking stick, her mobility compromised. The royal household had tried to adapt to keep her active and visible. A golf buggy at the Chelsea Flower Show helped the Queen stay comfortable. But she had become noticeably thinner and frailer. Something that's a state funeral is expected within the next 2 weeks. It will be a period of time when aspects of national life are put on hold. Daniella Ralph, BBC News.
Thousands of people went to Buckingham Palace yesterday to lay flowers and pay tribute. More are expected today. Our correspondent Jane Hill is there for us this morning. Jane, still dark, but still lots of people there paying their respects. What's the atmosphere like there?
Naga, yes, good morning from Buckingham Palace. So much quieter, as you would expect, than it was last night when we saw thousands and thousands of people come here to pay their respects, to try to take in the news as the news started to filter through. Still very early in the morning here, but Buckingham Palace with the flag at half-mast. It is the symbol of the royal family, isn't it, in this country? The Queen, of course, who died at Balmoral, who loved Balmoral, who loved her home in Aberdeenshire. But for so many people, it is inevitably Buckingham Palace, which is perhaps what comes to mind when you think of the British royal family. And so, just as we did last night, we expect to see many, many people gathering here today. Not so many right now, just this early in the morning, as you might expect. There's a few early morning runners and cyclists making their way down the Mall around the memorial here, and they are, I notice, stopping, pausing at the gates of the palace behind me, just looking through the gates, thinking perhaps about this new day as the UK wakes up for its first full day with a new monarch. But as you suggest, thousands of people came here last night as that news started to emerge. Tim Muffett has more on that.
An event we all knew would come one day. But for so many, one that is so profoundly sad.
It's heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking.
What did she mean to you?
The Queen means everything to me like my mum means to me. She was a fantastic lady. She'll always be a fantastic lady. She'll always be a part of my life forever, and I'll never forget her.
She meant a lot to me. For someone my age, I've got quite old grandparents who were born in the 1917 and 22, so she was part of their lives too. So talking to them, they knew her growing up, and it takes a thread back to that sort of era. And now I hear people talking about a king and a coronation, and it puts conversations I had with them in my head of when they would talk about a king, a coronation. So it feels very strange to have this person that's been the head of everything in my life go.
The McVeigh family are from Dublin and are on holiday in London.
Well, our two countries have been so close over so many centuries, and we've had a tough past, but it goes without saying that she was an iconic woman and a role model for women of all ages and all colours and beliefs. And my mum has been a fan of the Queen for so many years. She was a fan of her integrity, and
she's very sad. Yeah. Yeah, we shed a tear today.
Throughout her reign, Queen Elizabeth II was unwavering in her dedication to her role as monarch. And for so many people here tonight, it is vital to honour and respect the role she played in our national story.
It's very important. The Queen has done so much for us for the past 70 years, and I think that it's our kind of duty as the British people and just generally to show our respect to someone who served us for 70 years.
She means a family. Like since my boyhood, childhood, while I was in Bangladesh, I saw her through the TV. I really do feel emotional. And as a Muslim, I prayed for her after my prayer today.
We all knew this day would come one day.
Yeah.
And yet it still feels shocking and it still feels profound, doesn't it?
Yes.
How are you feeling?
I think she's a kind of mother figure to everyone, and she was so... I can't really put it into words. As a nation, we're mourning the loss of the Queen, but for the King and his family, yeah, they have lost their mum, their grandmother, their great-grandmother, and so that's really sad for them. You know, we have to remember that she was their family.
The reign of King Charles III has begun. But for many, the reign of Queen Elizabeth II will never be forgotten. Tim Muffett, BBC News, at Buckingham Palace.
And here this morning, as I look at the palace behind me, you can see those rows and rows of flowers, memories, notes that people have left. We wait to see what the day brings here at the palace, but I think it's fair to expect that we will see the numbers here again today that Tim was talking about last night. Right here early morning at the palace, it's actually relatively noisy because what's going on is barriers being put out, scaffolding being erected, and that is a sign of what is to come over the next 10 days or so. Crowds expected here at the palace, and of course the ceremony and the formalities that will unfold over the next 10 days. And so the preparations for all of that is very much underway at the moment. And there are still many details that we don't yet know, of course. But we will be here throughout the morning here at Buckingham Palace, and we expect to see people arriving. There's a smattering of people at the gates, and people peering through all the time and soaking in the news that came through yesterday evening. We'll have more from here at the palace to come. For now, Naga, Charlie, back to you.
Jane, thanks very much. Jane Hill there.
Our royal correspondent, Sarah Campbell, is at Balmoral for us this morning. Good morning to you, Sarah. So, of course, the royal family gathered there, including King Charles III. What do we know about events today and their movements?
Yes, good morning to you from a rather rainy Balmoral. You can see the tributes behind me, which were left yesterday. Those are the gates leading up to Balmoral Castle, and one can only really imagine the sadness that there has been inside those castle walls over the last evening, not just for the staff who will have worked with the Queen for many, many years, but also, of course, her family, who, as you say, rushed to be here yesterday because, apart from being a global figure, and there have been tributes flooding in from around the world, she was, of course, to them a mother and a grandmother. And really their movements here were the first sign yesterday that something really was seriously wrong. So the new king, King Charles, he arrived here. Of course, at that point he was Prince Charles. The Duchess of Cornwall also spent the night here at Balmoral, as well as her other 3 children, so the Duke of York, Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, and Prince Edward, along with his wife, the Countess of Wessex, and her 2 grandchildren, Prince William, who's now heir to the throne, and Prince Harry. They've all spent the evening inside Balmoral. And I think a sign as well with the change of monarchy that the new king, King Charles III, issued a statement quickly, because of course he now takes on the role that his mother performed for more than 70 years, and his statement really giving this sense of personal loss. He said, "The death of my beloved mother, Her Majesty the Queen, is a moment of great sadness for me and all members of my family." And as much as he will have had time to grieve, he must now get on with his new role. So we expect that he and the new Queen Consort will leave here at Balmoral probably later this morning. He will have tasks to perform. He will have his first audience with the new Prime Minister, Prime Minister Truss. He will have to go through the details for the period of mourning that will now be undertaken, for the funeral arrangements, which will have been long planned but will need to be signed off and finalised by him. And at some point later today, we do expect him to address the nation, to, as I say, take on that role that his mother has performed so flawlessly all these years, being some sense of comfort and reassurance to the nation. In a wider picture, in terms of what's going to happen today, the period of mourning has started. We will expect to hear bells being tolled at the big cathedrals and churches across the UK. We will expect flags to be at half-mast, gun salutes to happen in the royal parks. And all of our lives will be touched in some way. Big events may be cancelled, sporting, cultural events may be cancelled over the next 10 days or postponed. And books of condolence will be opened in local halls, in town halls. The royal website already has an online book of condolence for the many thousands, if not millions of people, I'm sure, who want to leave their own thoughts after the passing yesterday of Queen Elizabeth II.
Sarah, I understand the Queen had often described Balmoral, where you are, as the place where she was most happy. And I know people there were very familiar with her, coming and going over so many years.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful part of the world for anyone who's been here. Royal Deeside. It's got thousands of acres on the estate. It was an estate bought by Prince Albert for Queen Victoria a long time ago. But the Queen has spent so many happy summers here. She would normally travel here in July, stay here until sort of late September, early October. And it was really a place that she could get away from it all. She could spend time with family, she could have visitors, she could entertain. We know that she cherished her time here. The First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, said yesterday that she hoped it would be of some comfort to her family, that they know she will have spent her final days in a place that she truly loved. And as you say, people here really thought of her as part of their community, just as I say in her other residences, like in Windsor, people say the same, so they will have felt this quite personally. Crathy Kirk, which is just over there, she was a member of the congregation, and she would have really been missed here, and I think that was reflected in the people that came and laid tributes and spoke about her yesterday.
Sarah, for the moment, thank you very much. We're going to hear now from some...
It's history, and we just wanted to be here to share our condolences to the just be part of it, kind of thing. Yeah.
It's really sad news to hear. Actually, it's that's the reason we came. We were hoping to pass on our regards, or just to be here. So it's kind of sad, actually.
A sad day. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for everybody, I think. I think the whole nation will come together and just, feel the same. Yeah.
Although you never knew her or anything, but her significance was just incredible. And it doesn't really hit home, I don't think, until you hear something like this, and what she meant to us and what she meant to the country. It was absolutely incredible legacy.
Some thoughts here from the people who live around and about Balmoral, as they're saying, feeling that they have lost a member of their community and feeling that they wanted to come here and just share their thoughts, as we've seen at Buckingham Palace, at Windsor, at Holyrood, at all those sort of big places within the UK that have been so linked to the Queen over this last 70 years, and where people now feel that they just want to go to and just want to share their thoughts and be together.
And Sarah, of course, you're in darkness now, but I would imagine, like a lot of the other royal palaces and places connected with the Queen, they will be expecting many people to pay their tributes. We've seen flowers laid in many places already.
Yes, absolutely. No public here this morning. As you say, it's still dark here, although it is starting to get light here this morning. It doesn't feel too quiet because on either side of me I am surrounded by television crews from around the world who've been broadcasting through the night and will continue to broadcast a reflection of the fact that the Queen was not only a figure of great importance to Britain, but also around the world, and that's certainly been reflected, I think, hasn't it, in the tributes which have been coming from all corners of the globe, not just the Commonwealth, but countries where she wasn't a head of state, but all of these people respectful, understanding, and acknowledging the fact that Britain today has lost a figure who has been a global figure for 7 decades, and that is a huge loss to this country, but a huge loss much further afield as well.
Sarah, for the moment, thank you.
Her Majesty died just 2 days after officially inviting Liz Truss to become Prime Minister. Now, one of her first duties is to lead the UK through this period of mourning.
15 Prime Ministers served during the Queen's 70-year reign. Some of them, and the UK's current political leaders, have been paying tribute, as Leila Nathoo now reports.
Flags being lowered to half-mast at Downing Street. Former residents paid tribute to the Queen, who'd asked them to form a government.
The example, the duty, the selflessness, the way in which other people were put first, the way in which she handled crisis with great stoicism when they occurred, as they occurred a number of times during her reign. They were all examples to people about how to behave in their own lives and examples for our country.
Her longest-serving Prime Minister, Sir Tony Blair, said, "We have lost not just our monarch, but the matriarch of our nation, the figure who more than any other brought our country together, kept us in touch with our better nature, personified everything which makes us proud to be British. Gordon Brown took over the Labour government in 2007. He reflected tonight on the impression the Queen made around the world.
Everywhere I went, Her Majesty was respected, she was admired, she was revered, and we will miss her greatly. There is no monarch who has served so long with such popularity and held in such high esteem and dedicated herself so much to the future of our country.
David Cameron returned the Conservatives to power in 2010. He said of the Queen, "There can be no finer example of dignified public duty and unstinting service," saying, "We all owe our sincere gratitude for her continued devotion. I was fortunate to have been able to call on the knowledge of the world's greatest public servant and indeed the world's most experienced diplomat." In 2016, the Queen appointed Theresa May as Britain's second female Prime Minister.
I was fortunate enough to be able to meet her in different circumstances, including in the weekly audiences, but also at Balmoral, and saw a more relaxed Queen. But I think we are all mourning the fact that somebody who was a constant in our lives has now passed away.
It was just days ago that the Queen accepted the resignation of Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. Tonight, he said, "We think of her deep wisdom and historic understanding, and her seemingly inexhaustible but understated sense of duty. This is our country's saddest day, because she had a unique and simple power to make us happy. That is why we loved her." There was a sombre mood among politicians in Westminster and around the country.
The Queen was an ever-fixed mark in our lives. The world changed around us, politicians came and went. The Queen was our nation's constant. The Queen represented duty and courage, as well as warmth and compassion. The Queen was a living reminder of our collective past, of our greatest generation, and the sacrifices made for our freedom today.
Scotland loved, respected and admired her. And by all accounts, Her Majesty was rarely happier than when she was here in Scotland at her beloved Balmoral, a fact I have been privileged to observe personally. I hope it will be a source of comfort to her family that she spent her final days in a place that she loved so much.
On behalf of the Welsh Government and people in all parts of Wales, I offer our deepest condolences to all Her Majesty's children and their families on this sad occasion. She will be sorely missed by the many organisations in Wales she championed and supported over so many decades as patron or as president.
MPs have been accustomed to the Queen setting out government priorities in Parliament. They will begin paying their tributes in the Commons. Leila Nathoo, BBC News.
Well, it's just 3 months since the UK enjoyed a 4-day weekend to celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, marking her 70 years on the throne.
There were street parties, parades, a red arrows fly past, a rock concert at Buckingham Palace, and, of course, that unforgettable sketch with Paddington Bear. Sarah Campbell has been taking a look.
The sun shone and crowds filled the Mall. For 4 days in June, the message could not have been clearer.
God save the Queen! Concrete jungle where trees are made of.
A galaxy of rock royalty, and the British people in their thousands celebrating a reign etched so deeply in our memories.
Your Majesty, Mummy, you have been there for us for these 70 years. These pictures on your house are the story of your life and ours.
And listen to the reaction of this delighted and grateful crowd.
The Queen's appearances were brief but unforgettable.
Oh, that's wonderful.
On the first day, her delight both at the sight and sound of so many people and the antics of her great-grandson were obvious. That evening, Her Majesty lit the first of a giant chain of beacons, symbols of hope in 2,500 towns and cities from Shetland to Australia and New Zealand.
What a wonderful sound those bells can be heard all over the city of London.
The next morning, the bells of St Paul's marked the national service of Thanksgiving, the surrounding pavements packed with well-wishers.
We'll never see this again in our lifetime, so it's really a special day for us, yeah.
Absolutely magical atmosphere. We're enjoying every second.
This was the largest gathering of royals since before the pandemic. Almost all the members of her family were there, but not the Queen. She was unable to attend in person, but watched the service from home.
Thank you for showing us how service and faithfulness matter.
This is English champagne, especially for the Queen.
The thank yous continued at tens of thousands of Jubilee lunches, bringing communities together, something the Queen had done throughout her reign.
We talk about it, love, love, love. We talk about it, love.
At the Platinum Party at the Palace, a lineup of legends. Each with their own memory of Britain's longest reign.
And I've grown up with this woman. You know, I was 7 when she came to the throne. So she's always been part of my life.
Around the Olympics, she was absolutely essential. When some of the selection panel come through the city, she hosted them at Buckingham Palace on a Friday night and even appeared on the...
To acknowledge the wave of love that is surely coming across that balcony and sweeping its way through the palace.
And bringing events to a close on the balcony of Buckingham Palace, surrounded by her family, including her 3 heirs. A wonderful 4-day party was officially over. But what a platinum jubilee it had been.
Wonderful moments there from the Jubilee celebrations.
Let's just take you to Buckingham Palace this morning. You can see the tributes laid outside the gates of the palace. Yesterday evening, we saw hundreds gathering to pay tribute, to pay their respects to Her Majesty the Queen, the announcement of her passing yesterday early evening. And this morning, many more are expected to gather and just pay their respects, nod to Her Majesty, acknowledge her reign, her 70-year reign.
One of the things we're going to be doing for you as we stay on these pictures of Buckingham Palace, of course, dawn just breaking over London this morning. One of the things we're going to take the chance to do is talk to people who have turned out at Buckingham Palace, because it's really interesting this morning hearing the stories of the reasons why the Queen meant so much across generations and nationalities. Many people from all over the world are amongst those who are paying their respects today. So this is the image of Buckingham Palace this morning.
The time in the UK is coming up to 6:30. For viewers now in the UK, it's time to find out what's happening in terms of news, travel and weather, wherever you are.
Time now is 6:30. Let's have a look at some of the front pages of all the major UK newspapers, all of them, of course, leading with tributes to Her Majesty today.
We'll start with the Daily Telegraph, which reprints the Queen's own message of condolence to the families of the victims of the 9/11 attacks. Grief is the price we pay for love. US President Joe Biden referenced the comment in his tribute and recalled how she stood in solidarity with the United States in its darkest days.
Let's see the front page of the Daily Mirror, and a very simple front page there, just with the words, thank you. And what you realise as you look at all through the papers, maybe have a look at some of the inside pages as well this morning, there are so many beautiful images of the Queen, and often newspapers, it is glorious to spend time just looking at the pictures that have come throughout the years, the many, many years of her reign.
The Daily Mail says our hearts are broken with a portrait of the Queen from 1952 while she was Princess Elizabeth. How to find the words? The paper's columnist Sarah Vine asks. Our grief is 100 different emotions, all of them hard to grasp.
Interesting, the different times the newspapers have chosen to celebrate this morning. This is the front page of The Guardian, which features a portrait from the Queen's coronation.
And of course, there's been huge reaction from around the world to the news of the Queen's death. Tributes have appeared on the front pages of newspapers in the Commonwealth. The Daily Nation in Kenya says the Queen was one of the world's most respected figures and that her death brings to an end one of the longest reigns by any head of state in the world.
Very much part of what we're trying to do is give you a sense of how the Queen is being remembered all over the world. And this is the front page from Australia. The Herald Sun featuring, this is a much more recent picture of the Queen. Picture, one of those radiant smile pictures, probably one of the images people will remember best. And a very simple headline there, the word irreplaceable.
And as we were saying, many of the papers taking a look back at the Queen's life. And this is just one example here in the Sun. And it's, for so many people today, the Queen is all they've known as a monarch here in the UK for the whole of their lives. And it's always interesting to just look at the pictures over the years. So what the Sun has done is taken every one of her 96 years from birth in the cot, 1926, to one of her most recent pictures in 1922. And as you say, Charlie, it's fascinating to look back and just remember certain images, beautiful images that have marked so many key periods here in the UK.
You're watching BBC News Time now. It's 6:33.
You're watching a special edition of BBC Breakfast, remembering the life and legacy of Her Majesty the Queen, who died yesterday at the age of 96.
We will be bringing you reaction this morning from those who knew Her Majesty, those who worked with her and shared the same interests in the charities she supported, the sports she loved, and the Commonwealth, which was so important to her.
We'll try to bring you and give you an idea of how the coming days will play out. The UK is mourning its longest-serving monarch. Also, though, preparations have begun to officially welcome the new king, Charles III.
Yes, the other thing we'll show you is what is happening this morning as people across the Commonwealth and the UK come together to express their sorrow and pay tribute.
Now, our correspondent Jane Hill is at Buckingham Palace this morning. And Jane, seeing you now, of course, we were just seeing pictures there of the palace, dawn breaking over London. And such a contrast, isn't there? Such a contrast when you think of the joy of the celebrations of the Platinum Jubilee celebrations. And just going back to last night, where you saw people gathering, and Buckingham Palace, of course, a focal point for the nation's grief.
Yes, that shift in just a few months, and it was the most beautiful weekend for the most part, wasn't it, Naga? And that four-day weekend, we were here, we saw Trooping the Colour, we saw the party at the palace. The sun shone for the first couple of days. It really was beautiful. And as we've been reflecting so many times, how much the tens of thousands of people then gathered here cheered when the Queen appeared on the balcony behind me. This morning here at Buckingham Palace, still very early in the morning, but I'm struck by actually, even just in the last half an hour since I last spoke to you, the number of people who are here. Not huge numbers, of course, it is 6:30 in the morning, but there are dozens and dozens of people. And people run round this area, they cycle down the Mall, they cycle around the palace, and a lot of those people stopping at the gates behind me, pausing, perhaps looking at the official sign that was put up confirming the death of Her Majesty yesterday and looking at the many, many flowers that are already there along the gates. And I think we can expect many, many more people here today. And certainly the authorities, it would appear, are expecting very large crowds. It's relatively noisy here at the palace simply because they are putting up the barriers and erecting scaffolding and preparing for the sort of crowds that are likely to be here in the coming days. Let's cross over to our colleague John Maguire, because he's been talking to people, and I think he's not too far away from me and has been looking at some of the flowers and tributes that people have been leaving as well. I'm hoping that we can talk to John now. John, are you speaking to people? What can you tell us where you are?
Jane, morning. At the gates of Buckingham Palace and all the way along the frontage of the palace that's so familiar from television pictures that you see at state occasions. Well, we were all here, weren't we, just a few weeks ago for the Platinum Jubilee. In a funny kind of way, there's a very similar atmosphere here today. I think, of course, that was all about joy. It's a sad day, there's a really sad feeling here today, but I think that sense of paying tribute to the Queen remains today, and many people have come here to do so. Been chatting to folks in the crowd. Let me just introduce you to the Knight family here, who are going to tell us, morning all, who are going to tell us about their morning so far, because you've had an early start, obviously.
Yeah.
Tell us what you've done and why.
Up about 4 o'clock this morning to get the 5 a.m. train with friends here. Just almost wanted to come up last night. Just that feeling of, wanting to be here and pay our respects, really. So, but yeah, Vicky said she was coming up at 5 a.m, so I thought I'll tag along, jump on, be an honorary knight for the day.
And Vicky, she'll be the only monarch that you've ever known, that I've ever known. Important for you today to come, why?
My parents have known, my grandparents have known. She's been a stability of our country, really. It's just utterly heartbreaking to see the Union flag at half-mast, and I don't know, really. I just feel that they need to come and pay our respects, so, yeah.
There are lots of people here today, crews from around the world, television crews, lots of different journalists, people passing by on their way to work with some sort of curiosity. You've made that special journey. You're Australian originally, Christine.
Originally, yeah. Yes. Been here for 35 years.
Yeah, right.
Just became
So you've always had the Queen in your life?
Absolutely, always been there. And, I know, royalist, not royalist, it's actually irrelevant. She's just this amazing woman. And yeah, we were saying earlier about the whole James Bond Paddington Bear thing and how she changed with the times, how she wouldn't have done that kind of stuff maybe 50 years ago, but moved along and did it, and always so beautifully and tastefully and so wonderful. So until she's never going to be on that balcony again is, pretty sad. My daughter said to me yesterday that her children will never know a queen. And that's, they'll only ever know a king, and I feel like that's a loss for them, to have never known her, so, yeah.
And do you feel that Elizabeth as a person, she seemed to even transcend her role as the monarch, as the Queen, as the head of the Commonwealth?
Absolutely. You can't look up to anybody quite like her, really. It's just, I don't really have words, I'm afraid. It's just
that thing, wherever you go travelling, everyone says to you, where are you from? England. Oh, do you know the Queen? Like, it's that thing, isn't it?
Like she's on the tube.
Exactly, of course. So, but we all did feel like we knew her, didn't we? So
you had that personal connection, as strange as it may seem.
Yeah,
perhaps.
And even in her last sort of smile with that picture that she had on Tuesday, that cheeky little grin, that's the bit that's going to live on, isn't it? I suppose.
That's it, isn't it? That she was working. She was working, and right to the end. That she did, literally.
The James Bond and the Paddington, and we gather a great sense of humour.
Absolutely. She was a special lady, aside from being the Queen, or because she was the Queen, I don't know. But she just was a very special person, and I think all little girls should look up to her.
And Leila, you've come here very early this morning to make sure that we can come here before Leila goes to school?
Yeah, so we got up at 4 o'clock with the aim to get here, lay our flowers. Leila's written a letter to His Majesty the King and to send her love to the family. and we wanted to come up and personally deliver it.
Leila, what did you write? Can you remember?
I'm very sorry about your mum dying, I think it was.
Yeah,
very sorry about your mum.
We will miss you very much. Lots of love to the royal family.
That's beautiful. I think, well, hopefully he gets to hear about that. I'm sure that sentiment will be very well received. Thank you, folks. Thanks very much for spending some time with us this morning. We'll let you have a quiet moment and reflect. I know as you were before we burst in, but nice to see you this morning. Let's just go and see a couple of other people. Actually, they're just being interviewed by another crew, as you can see this morning. Nice hug there. For the family that we were just talking to. Crowds are building, as I say, people coming and coming into work, Jane, this morning. All of the floral tributes lining all the way along the front of the gates of Buckingham Palace now. Many people not quite knowing why they've come in a funny kind of way, but knowing that they wanted to mark this moment in history, as we were just saying. For most of us here, most of you watching at home this morning, she'll be the only monarch that we've ever known. Of course, we now have King Charles, so we'll get used to a new monarch, a king, for the first time in many of our lifetimes. The crowds will build here, I'm sure of it, as I say. So similar in a funny kind of way to the celebrations from just a couple of months ago, but with, of course, one key difference. You were here too, Naga, weren't you? Just across the way there at Canada Gate, special days. This is a special day too, but as I say, entirely different reasons. Back to you in the studio.
John, I was there and we worked together, didn't we, celebrating Her Majesty's Jubilee. And I think one thing that surprised us both, and again, I don't know why it surprises me now, just the breadth of generations paying their tribute today, from young to old. It didn't matter what age you were. You didn't have to be a traditionalist to appreciate Her Majesty.
That's absolutely right. I think we, young and old, as you say, she meant so much. Is she the nation's mother? Is she the nation's grandmother, nation's great-grandmother for so many people? Young Leila there would be the same age as some of the Queen's great-grandchildren, but clearly meant a lot to a lot of people. I think, as Graham was just saying, he'd never met her, seemed like a very distant figure in a funny kind of way with a very different life, but there was that personal connection, and that's what's being reflected by the people we're talking to here this morning.
John, thanks very much. I think one of the things poignant there was that young girl saying that her children, that young girl, when she has children, will only ever know kings in the future, and that to have a queen has been such a rare thing and such a privilege.
Yes, absolutely. Let's go to Windsor Castle now. Our correspondent Duncan Kennedy is there. And Duncan, it's really interesting. We're getting our first chance, really, this morning to talk to people. And I know over the years, crowds have always gone to Windsor Castle at major occasions, often big celebrations. Tell us a little bit about how it feels at Windsor Castle this morning.
Well, I think the word to use, really, good morning, Charlie, is just people are bewildered. Yesterday we had a queen, today we have a king. There's not only that physical change in the nation's infrastructure, there's the psychological one as well. And I think people are just waking up to that, literally and figuratively, here in Windsor this morning. It was, of course, the place that she really loved, where John was there at Buckingham Palace, is referred to as the office home. Here, perhaps, it was more the home office. She made her first broadcast here way back in October 1940 as a 14-year-old. She'd been evacuated from London, and she broadcast to other children to give them courage to exist away from their parents when they were evacuated because of the Blitz. It was a place where she was very happy. She used to go to the Royal Horse Show here every year. She would watch the polo over in the polo park there and watch Prince Charles and others play polo. It was also, of course, a place of great sadness for her. We had the fire here in 1992, and of course, in April of last year, it was where Prince Philip passed away. Over the next few days and hours, just like at Buckingham Palace there, we're expecting hundreds, possibly thousands of people to come and lay their flowers and pay their respects. It all began last night, and my colleague, Fergal Keane, met some of those who came to Windsor.
The signal of an ending, in the place so close to her heart, and in whose heart she was beloved. What are you feeling?
Wow, it's just hit me.
It really has, and I think it's going to hit everybody in this town, but not only here, all over the world. You know, she was a grandmother, she was a mum, she's part of my life, she's part of my mum's life, my late father's life, everybody.
As the news filtered out across the town, there was comfort in gathering together, to absorb, to reflect.
It's very sad. I think everyone's just come to pay their respects because she's such an amazing woman. It's just very sombre mood in Windsor, really.
And what did she represent to people of your generation?
A guiding light, a moral code, how to conduct yourself, how to act, you know, what's right and what's wrong.
And she was such a special lady. Like, she was so lovely and so cute and so warm, and I think she just won everyone's heart. Like, even with my daughter, she said, I really want her to live to 100. She's been saying that to me for the last few years. And she's just part of our life, really. She was a part of our life, especially living local as well.
The sense of royal continuity is not broken by death. But the Queen's example of resilience in the face of adversity will be missed.
She's had terrible moments throughout her reign of things that have happened that she's had to deal with. And she's just done I think she's done just a good job. And she said it would be for her life, for the length of her life, and that's what it's been.
Amir Bukhari was getting calls from relatives in Pakistan who'd heard the news. He runs a cafe beside Windsor Castle.
No words actually to express my emotions. It's really sad.
What did she mean to you?
She was really, really important. It's not only me, it's around the world. Everybody will feel very sad, very down, very depressed. Yes, and for us, she was a neighbour, and we feel more.
No matter how long anticipated, the end has crystallised loss. The passing of a monarch who symbolised to people the best of their nation, of themselves. Their queen gone, their mourning just begun. Fergal Keane, BBC News, Windsor.
Well, Fergal Keane there were just some of the voices of some of the people who have been passing through Windsor in the past few hours. I myself have been down to Cambridge Gate, which is just a few hundred yards in that direction on the other side of the castle, and the flowers are starting to form there, as well as some very poignant notes. One or two I read said, thank you for your service. Another note read, we have you in our prayers. And a third note said, our condolences to the royal family. As John was saying earlier, people seem to want to respond to this. Many of them perhaps don't know why, but they just don't feel as though they can absorb this in their homes. They feel as though they want to go out and be at the scene of where these momentous events are taking place. What happens next? Well, we will hear an address, as you've been saying, from King Charles later. As for Windsor, well, it's anticipated, Buckingham Palace haven't confirmed anything yet, but it's anticipated this will be the final resting place for the Queen in the King George VI Memorial Chapel, which is part of the St George's Chapel. Prince Philip himself is already buried in the Royal Vault here in St George's Chapel, and it's expected, if these plans do come to fruition, that he will be moved and laid to rest alongside the Queen. But those are matters yet to be confirmed by Buckingham Palace over the course of the next few days. All these kinds of details will be put in place. Those are the wider, the strategic decisions that have to be taken. But as Fergal and as John, as we've been seeing from here, this is also very much a personal matter. The people of this kingdom and many people from abroad simply want to come and pay their respects and their condolences to this remarkable woman.
Duncan, I think you may have mentioned a moment ago about some of the messages you've read, flowers that have been left where you are as well. Just in terms of practicalities, there are people gathering. I know there were some people there yesterday as well, but clearly not close to the castle itself. How are things being managed? How are people being helped if they want to go and pay their respects?
There are a lot of security people here, a lot of Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle officials that are walking around here. I was here for the passing of Prince Philip last year, and we were asked to pass on the message of discouraging people from coming because they didn't want what they expected to be a kind of Princess Diana moment where so many flowers were put in front of Cambridge Gate, but they don't seem to be saying that this time round. Last night we saw many hundreds of people come to Cambridge Gate and indeed to the King Henry VIII gate behind me to lay flowers, and there doesn't seem to be any sense of discouraging that. Why would they? This is such a special moment for this nation. This really is the big one. This is the Queen of our country, and people want to express their ways and their emotions and their feelings in these kinds of small, intimate demonstrations of the way they thought of this woman. And that comes through bouquets, it comes through these notes that I've just been referring to. And I expect that will build in the days ahead. We've got many days of preparations and many days of mourning to come. And I think people will want to mark this in that intimate way with their families, with their partners, with their children, tourists, locals. If it's what happened in Buckingham Palace is the town end of things, you might view this as the country end of things. People will make their choice where to come to pay their respect, where to pay their condolences to the Queen. And this will be just one pivotal moment, one pivotal spot where many thousands of people are expected over the course of the next few days.
Duncan, for the moment, thank you very much.
Her Majesty was driven by a sense of public duty, but she was sustained by her religious faith. Among her many titles, she was the Supreme Governor of the Church of England.
Let's talk more about this with the author and historian Catherine Pepinster. Very good morning to you, Catherine. Thank you so much for your time. I just wonder, first of all, your thoughts, because a lot of people are feeling very differently than they might have imagined today. You're a historian, but what are your thoughts this morning?
Well, like probably most of the country, I do not know a time when Elizabeth II was not our Queen. She was part of the background that perhaps we sometimes took for granted. She offered that stability and continuity. But I think the thing that strikes me about her was that while she provided us with a framework, it was her faith that was her framework. One of the members of the clergy who was very close to her once told me that Christianity was the scaffolding of her life. Your intro mentioned her title of Supreme Governor of the Church of England. That was an official role. She had another title too, which is mentioned on every coin of the realm, Defender of the Faith, a title that our monarchs have had since the time of Henry VIII. And I think it's that title that really sums up what she was about. She felt a great sense of duty about her religion. She represented it, but she was imbued with it too from very early childhood. She believed most profoundly in the Christian faith. I think for most of her life it was very understated. Of course, we're used to seeing her at church services leading the nation, and she did have that role in the Church of England. But interestingly, in later years, she spoke more explicitly about her own faith. When she gave her Christmas messages from the year 2000 onwards, she always talked about how the teachings of Christ were what she tried to follow. And she spoke again about this quite recently when she sent a message to the Lambeth Conference, the gathering of Anglican bishops from around the world, where she wished them well, but she also talked about how much that faith meant to her.
Catherine, good morning to you. As well as her personal strong Christian faith, she was also very conscious of Commonwealth countries and other religions having a place, and she was very respectful of that too.
Absolutely. She was, I think, remarkably broad-minded, even very early on in her life. In 1952, when she gave her first Christmas message before her coronation in June '53, she asked that people of all faiths pray for her. And I think that was a really quite progressive thing for somebody to say in 1952, recognising the importance and significance of those other faiths for other people. And she liked to honour those faiths through the Commonwealth Day services. I think the Commonwealth helped introduce her to other faiths early on in her time as monarch. But of course, as Britain has become more diverse, those faiths have become more important in this country as well. And she often met leaders, representatives of other faiths too.
It's an important point you make, Catherine, and as we're seeing already, the tributes to her are coming from all walks of life and all religions.
Yeah. Yes, I think that's absolutely right. And I remember being at Lambeth Palace once, the London home of the Archbishop of Canterbury, for an event that marked her Diamond Jubilee, and she spoke there, and the guests were from all faiths around Britain, and she spoke about the importance of those faiths, and they clearly had a great respect for her and saw her as their queen as much as she was linked to the Church of England by that title of Supreme Governor. She was queen for people of all faiths, and of course for those with no faith. She had that respect for them very much too.
Catherine, very good to speak to you this morning. Thank you so much for your time. That's Catherine Pepinster, writer, author and historian.
Her Majesty wasn't just one of the most loved and respected women in the world. She was, of course, also one of the most filmed.
Here is some of the footage taken of the Queen over her 7 decades as monarch.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service. God help me to make good my vow, and God bless all of you who are willing to share in it.
Good morning. Welcome to a special edition of Breakfast on BBC News.
Our nation mourns following the death of Queen Elizabeth II. Her Majesty died yesterday at Balmoral, bringing to an end a 70-year reign.
The Queen's eldest son, now King Charles III, was at her bedside. He'll return to London later today.
Tributes have been paid from around the world as hundreds of mourners gather at Buckingham Palace.
It's Friday, the 9th of September. You're watching a special edition of BBC Breakfast following the death of Her Majesty the Queen.
Britain's longest-serving monarch passed away yesterday, aged 96, at Balmoral Castle, the Scottish retreat which Her Majesty had visited since she was a girl.
The news was confirmed in a statement from the palace at 6:30 p.m. after the Queen's 4 children, including the new King, Charles III, had travelled to Balmoral.
On today's programme, we'll be remembering Her Majesty's life and legacy and speaking to those who knew and loved her.
we'll bring you the latest reaction from Balmoral to Buckingham Palace and across the Commonwealth. First, our royal correspondent, Daniella Ralph, has been looking back at the final days and weeks of the Queen's life.
The final images we have, Queen Elizabeth II still carrying out duties into her final days. On Tuesday, at Balmoral, she welcomed the new Prime Minister. These photos, the record of her last official engagement, bringing to an end 7 decades of service. Yesterday afternoon at Aberdeen Airport, several senior members of the royal family arrived to be with the Queen. The Duke of Cambridge drove the Duke of York and Earl and Countess of Wessex to Balmoral. Prince Charles, the new king, was already there with his wife and his sister, Princess Anne. Harry, the Duke of Sussex, arrived separately later in the evening. Here in the UK this week with his wife for a number of charity events, Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, did not accompany him to Scotland. At 6:30, in a statement of just 26 words, Buckingham Palace announced the Queen had died peacefully earlier in the afternoon. As is tradition, the statement was attached to the palace gates by 2 footmen, as tribute to Britain's longest reigning monarch began.
Queen Elizabeth II was the rock on which modern Britain was built. Our country has grown and flourished under her reign. She was the very spirit of Great Britain, and that spirit will endure. She has been our longest ever reigning monarch. It's an extraordinary achievement to have presided with such dignity and grace for 70 years. And with the passing of the second Elizabethan age, we usher in a new era in the magnificent history of our great country, exactly as Her Majesty would have wished, by saying the words, "God save the King."
And heartfelt words too from the leader of the opposition.
For the vast majority of us, the late Queen has been simply the Queen, the only Queen, above all else, our Queen. As we mourn her loss, we should also treasure her life, our longest serving and greatest ever monarch. Above the clashes of politics, she stood not for what the nation fought over, but what it agreed upon.
Cheered by onlookers, one of the Queen's last royal engagements was in July, with her daughter Princess Anne opening a new state-of-the-art hospice in Berkshire. But these kinds of visits had become rare over the past year, as the Queen relied on her walking stick, her mobility compromised. The royal household had tried to adapt to keep her active and visible. A golf buggy at the Chelsea Flower Show helped the Queen stay comfortable. But she had become noticeably thinner. Jubilee enters a period of mourning. A state funeral is expected within the next 2 weeks. It will be a period of time when aspects of national life are put on hold. Daniella Ralph, BBC News.
Well, let's go straight to Balmoral now, and you can see many, many flowers have been laid yesterday, late into the evening and in the early hours of this morning. Balmoral, of course, where all the senior members of the royal family gathered yesterday, including, of course, King Charles. Our royal correspondent, Sarah Campbell, is there for us this morning. Sarah, what do we know about what will happen today and the movements of the royal family?
Yes, indeed. Good morning to you, Charlie. Those gates that you were looking at there, where people continue this morning to leave those flowers and messages for the Queen and for her family. Those gates lead up to Balmoral Castle, a place so close to the Queen's heart and where her family rushed to yesterday to be by her side. And that really was, as Daniella was saying, the moment that it became clear that the situation was extremely serious. And as much as the Queen is a global figure and the tributes have been flooding in from around the world, she was, of course, a mother and a grandmother, and her children arrived here yesterday. So the new King, King Charles, with the new Queen Consort, Camilla. They are in Balmoral, along with the rest of her children, Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, Prince Andrew, Prince Edward and his wife, the Countess of Wessex. She was also a grandmother, and arriving yesterday, Prince William, who is now the heir to the throne, along with his younger brother, Prince Harry. It must have been a very difficult evening in Balmoral Castle, grieving, coming to terms with the loss of this much-loved family member. But you're asking what will happen today? Well, the reality, certainly for the new king, is that he must immediately take on this new role that he has spent so long preparing for. And the first thing that he will do, we expect later this morning, is that he will leave here, Balmoral, and he will travel down to London and he will start that role. The personal side, I think, was made very clear in the statement that he released yesterday. The statement from the new King Charles III. He said, "The death of my beloved mother, Her Majesty the Queen, is a moment of the greatest sadness for me and for all of the members of my family." He will be undergoing a period of grieving, but he will also have to return to London. We expect today that he will have his first audience with the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss. He will have to sign off the funeral details for the days of mourning that are due to occur over the next 2 weeks, 10 days or so. Those plans will have been long in the planning, but he will need to make the final sign-off. And the rest of the country this morning will start, so you will see flags at half-mast, you will hear bells toll, you will hear gun salutes in the royal parks. There will be books of condolence that will be opened for the many thousands, if not millions, of people who will want to leave their own tributes to the Queen, who, as we know, died here at Balmoral peacefully yesterday afternoon.
Sarah, you referenced at the beginning of what you said, the personal side of this story, and right at the heart of this, of course, is a family who've lost a mother and a grandmother. And I think many people by now will have heard some of the stories Prime Ministers have been telling about how special Balmoral was. Those images that have appeared over the years of picnics, of barbecues, of very special times for the family at that place.
You're absolutely right. It is a beautiful part of the world. The River Dee is rushing just at the end of the road there. It's 50,000 acres of this estate. It's a beautiful part of the world where the Queen and her family were able to come and escape. One of the most personal pictures that she released was at the death of her husband. Prince Philip, of course, died last April, and it was a lovely picture which showed the two of them on a mountainside here at Balmoral, which had been taken by the Countess of Wessex, and I think emphasised how important this place was to both her and Prince Philip. They both used to travel up here for a long summer, leaving London in July. They would stay here until sort of early October. And as I say, it's a place that they could be themselves, that they could have barbecues by the loch, that they could go and walk the dogs, ride the horses. Clearly a place that was very special to her and her family. And she was very special to the local community here as well. She was very much seen as part of the community. She was a member of the Crathykirk congregation, the small church that is not too far away from where I'm standing now. And they will miss her deeply, and people have been coming. You can see the flowers at the gates here to Balmoral. If I just read you some of the messages. A mother, a grandmother, a great-grandmother, our Queen. Your job here is done. Rest easy, says one of them. Another says, thank you for your dedication, service and reign. You have been a source of inspiration and a calming figure throughout my life. You'll be sadly missed. Rest in peace. And yesterday, the BBC spoke to some of those people who travelled here because they wanted to pay their own tribute to the Queen.
Just very sad. She's been a monarch for over 70 years, and it's history, and we just wanted to be here to share our condolences to the just be part of it, kind of thing. Yeah.
It's really sad news to hear. Actually, it's that's the reason we came. We were hoping to pass on our regards, or just to be here. So it's kind of sad, actually.
A sad day. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for everybody, I think. I think the whole nation will come together and just, feel the same. Yeah.
Although you never knew her or anything, but her significance was just incredible, and it doesn't really hit home, I don't think, until you hear something like this. And what she meant to us and what she meant to the country. It was absolutely incredible legacy.
The thoughts there of some of the people who live near the Balmoral estate. You know, Charlie, it hardly seems possible, does it, that just 3 days ago the photograph was issued of the Queen smiling, standing in the drawing room here at Balmoral, having just appointed her 15th Prime Minister, and here we are 3 days later talking about the death of Britain's longest reigning monarch. Many people still, I think, coming to terms with that news. Back to you.
Sarah, thank you very much.
Now, thousands of people travelled to Buckingham Palace yesterday to lay flowers and pay tribute. More are expected today. Let's talk to our correspondent, Jane Hill, who's there this morning. You know, Jane, we spoke just an hour ago, and there is a contrast, isn't there? Obviously, yesterday, there were thousands, hundreds of people gathering, and this morning it's been quiet, but I can just see people milling around behind you, looking at the tributes, the comments that have been made, and people celebrating the life of the Queen as they commemorate her.
Yes, and Naga, what's so striking, I think, here at Buckingham Palace, just 1 hour ago, as you say, really very quiet. Even though it's still only 7 o'clock in the morning, that has really changed even in the last hour. And there's a good few hundred people here, I would say, even though it is still early. People arriving all the time, and every time I turn around from my vantage point here, I see someone walking behind me, in one case a lady running behind me in full running gear, clutching a bouquet of flowers. Every third person I look at as I turn around probably is holding flowers, and they're making their way to the gates there to leave them. And I think that's really striking. We heard from that family on breakfast just a little earlier, didn't we? 3 generations of a family, including a little girl who was on her way to school, and the whole family had got up at 4 o'clock in the morning because they wanted that girl to come here to see the flowers. She'd written a letter. She wanted to leave a tribute of her own, and they made that effort to get up really early in the morning so that they could do that before the start of the school day. I've seen people laying flowers who, I'm guessing from their dress, they've come here on their way to work, and people making that effort and just wanting to pause and take in the enormity, take in this moment of history, really, here at the palace. And we expect those crowds to build over the course of the day. And as you say, there were thousands and thousands of people here until late last night. And our correspondent, Tim Muffett, was out talking to some of them.
An event we all knew would come one day. But for so many, one that is so profoundly sad.
It's heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking.
What did she mean to you?
The Queen means everything to me like my mum means to me. She was a fantastic lady, she'll always be a fantastic lady, she'll always be a part of my life forever, and I'll never forget her.
She meant a lot to me. For someone my age, I've got quite old grandparents who were born in the 1917 and 22, so she was part of their lives too. So talking to them, they knew her growing up, and it takes a thread back to that sort of era. And now I hear people talking about a king and a coronation, and it puts conversations I had with them in my head of when they would talk about a king, a coronation. So it feels very strange to have this person that's been the head of everything in my life go.
The Maguire family are from Dublin and are on holiday in London.
Well, our two countries have been so close over so many centuries, and we've had a tough past, but it goes without saying that she was an iconic woman and a role model for women of all ages and all colours and beliefs. And my mum has been a fan of the Queen for so many years. She was a fan of her integrity, and
she's very sad. Yeah. Yeah, we shed a tear today.
Throughout her reign, Queen Elizabeth II was unwavering in her dedication to her role as monarch. And for so many people here tonight, it is vital to honour and respect the role she played in our national story.
It's very important. The Queen has done so much for us for the past 70 years, and I think that it's our kind of duty as the British people and just generally to show our respect to someone who served us for 70 years.
She mean a family. Like since my boyhood, childhood, while I was in Bangladesh, I saw her through the TV. I really do feel emotional. And as a Muslim, I prayed for her after my prayer today.
We all knew this day would come one day.
Yeah.
And yet it still feels shocking and it still feels profound, doesn't it?
Yes.
How are you feeling?
I think she's a kind of mother figure to everyone, and she was so, I can't really put it into words. As a nation, we're mourning the loss of the Queen, but for the King and his family, yeah, they have lost their mum, their grandmother, their great-grandmother, and so that's really sad for them. You know, we have to remember that she was their family.
The reign of King Charles III has begun. But for many, the reign of Queen Elizabeth II will never be forgotten. Tim Muffett, BBC News, at Buckingham Palace.
So those the scenes here last night. I have to say it actually feels quite busy here this morning at Buckingham Palace, and that is partly because preparations are underway. You may get a sense through some of the noises off here. There's a lot of work, a lot of activity going on. Barriers are being erected a vast distance down the Mall, all around me, scaffolding going up. That's partly because so many more people are expected here at the Palace today. And of course, there are days of formalities and ceremony to come, many of the details of which are still to be made public. But we know that there will be many days of mourning to come. Meanwhile, against that backdrop, of course, people continue to arrive here at the Palace. I would say perhaps 300 people along the gates. And, well, my goodness, you get the sense there of just how many people are bringing flowers and messages. 3 months ago, we stood here in beautiful sunshine, didn't we, celebrating and marking the Platinum Jubilee, saying thank you to the Queen for 70 years on the throne. And again, here today, people are laying flowers and standing and remembering and saying thank you all over again. Now here at Buckingham Palace, it's back to you, Naga and Charlie.
Jane, thank you very much. Jane Hill there for us.
Let's take you now to Downing Street. Our correspondent Nick Eardley is there for us this morning. Morning to you, Nick. I think a lot of people this morning will be mindful that one of the very last images of the Queen was with the now Prime Minister Liz Truss, that moment at Balmoral. And, of course, politics is not normal for a period of time now. Just take us through what will be happening.
Yes, Charlie, there's been a lot of change here over the past few years, but one of the things that's always remained the same, of course, is that Prime Ministers go and meet the Queen. They have those weekly addresses. 15 Prime Ministers held regular audiences over her reign with Queen Elizabeth II. As you say, the normal functions of government will be suspended. There will be some core things that continue, but don't expect to see much politics over the next few days. I've just walked up Whitehall, and here in Downing Street, flags are flying at half-mast, as you would expect. And we've already seen tributes pour in from across the political world. The Prime Minister, Liz Truss, was describing the Queen as the rock on which modern Britain was built. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, said that Queen Elizabeth stood not for what the nation fought over, but for what it agreed upon. And I think that's been a bit of a theme in the tributes we've heard over the past few hours, that the Queen was someone who politicians could go to for counsel, for advice on discharging their responsibilities, and that she was always there to offer that helping hand for new Prime Ministers when they took office. And of course, those tributes aren't just domestic, they are international as well. Tributes have been paid from across the world to Her Majesty, as our diplomatic correspondent James Landale reports.
From the moment the Queen's reign began in Kenya in 1952, she played a constant and significant role on the international stage. And the news of her death prompted an outpouring of sorrow and regret in every corner of the globe.
As her 12th Canadian Prime Minister, I'm having trouble believing that my last sit-down with her was my last. I will so miss those chats. She was thoughtful, wise, curious, helpful, funny, and so much more. She was one of my favorite people in the world, and I will miss her so.
The President of France, Emmanuel Macron, said Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth embodied the continuity and unity of the British nation for over 70 years. I keep the memory of a friend of France, a Queen of Hearts who marked her country and her century forever. The Indian Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, said Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth will be remembered as a stalwart of our times. She provided inspiring leadership to her nation and people. And the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, said it is with deep sadness that we learned of the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth. On behalf of the Ukrainian people, we extend sincere condolences to the royal family, the entire United Kingdom and the Commonwealth over this irreparable loss. The President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, who met the Queen in more peaceful times, offered his condolences, saying she'd enjoyed the love and respect of her subjects and authority on the world stage. She was dubbed by one of her biographers as Queen of the World, visiting hundreds of countries throughout her reign. She was monarch of 15 separate realms, the head of a commonwealth of some 56 nations. So there was no surprise that news of the Queen's death made headlines around the world.
Königin Elisabeth II. Ist tot. Das teilte der Buckingham Palace in London mit.
Last night at the White House, the flags were at half-mast. Throughout her reign, the Queen was a living embodiment of the transatlantic relationship, meeting no fewer than 12 US presidents. In a statement, President Biden described her as a stateswoman of unmatched dignity and constancy.
It's good to see her.
Barack Obama said she had reigned with grace, elegance and a tireless work ethic, views echoed on the streets of Washington.
I admire her greatly. Yeah, I'm so sorry that she's passed. I mean, she's an icon here, everywhere.
Horrible. I've been reading about her my whole life. She's one of the sane people in the UK, like the US, and that's just sad.
As head of the Commonwealth throughout her reign, the Queen nurtured and shaped a unique international organisation whose leaders, past and present, relied on her wisdom and judgment.
The last days of the Queen's life captures who she was in so many ways, working till the very end on behalf of the people she loved. And that is why I'm sure that we will receive the news of her passing with both emotions of deep sadness, but also gratitude for a life that was utterly and completely devoted to the service of others.
And it was to a meeting of Commonwealth leaders that the Queen made her last overseas tour in 2015, visiting Malta, an island she'd once called home. The bookend of a life of duty and diplomacy on the international stage. James Landale, BBC News.
A reminder there of the respect in which the Queen was held across the world, really. And domestically, those tributes have been pouring in, as you would expect, from politicians across the political spectrum. It was, of course, just Tuesday when the Queen met her latest Prime Minister, the 15th of her reign, Liz Truss, up at Balmoral in Aberdeenshire. It has been said by a number of former Prime Ministers that the Queen was always really across the detail in those audiences she held with Prime Ministers, that she read a lot of her papers that she gets from the government about the business of the day, that she was very plugged into what was going on here in the UK and across the world too. We will see more tributes over the course of today. Of course, at noon, Parliament will hold an extraordinary sitting which will be dedicated to tributes to Her Majesty. We expect that fairly soon the the Prime Minister, the new Prime Minister Liz Truss, to meet the new monarch, King Charles. An extraordinary moment really in British history, because both of them have only assumed those roles within the past 72 hours. A real feeling that the Constitution in the UK here is changing. We're seeing those new faces at the very top of British life. So there will be those tributes in Parliament this afternoon, more tomorrow as well. Parliament doesn't normally sit on a Saturday, but it will tomorrow to hear more tributes, and senior members of Parliament will take the oath to the new King, to King Charles, which will be a very visible reminder here at the heart of power in central London of the changing times in which we're living.
Nick, for the moment, thank you very much.
The time now in the UK is 27 minutes past 7. It's time for our UK viewers to get the news, travel and weather where they are. Going to bring you up to date with the front pages of all the major newspapers, and as you can imagine, all in the UK leading with tributes to Her Majesty.
Let's start with the front page of the Daily Telegraph, reprinting the Queen's own message of condolence to the families of the victims of the 9/11 attacks. Grief is the price we pay for love. The quote from that time. US President Joe Biden referenced the comment in his tribute, recalled how she stood in solidarity with the US in its darkest days.
Often the simplest words are the most effective. And here, on the front page of the Mirror, 2. Thank you. Our hearts are broken, says the Daily Mail, with a portrait of the Queen from 1952 while she was Princess Elizabeth. How to find the words, the paper's columnist Sarah Vine asks. Our grief is 100 different emotions, all of them hard to grasp.
Interesting how the papers have chosen images from different parts of her reign. The Guardian here you can see featuring a portrait from the Queen's coronation.
And as you would imagine, there has been huge reaction from around the world to the news of the Queen's death. Tributes have appeared on the front pages of newspapers in the Commonwealth. In Australia, for example, the Herald Sun, as you can see, featuring a more recent picture of the Queen. The headline, irreplaceable.
Yes, getting a sense of the impact the Queen's death has had around the world. We're looking at the front page of the New York Times now, describing the Queen as the spirit of Britain. The paper says the Queen was an enduring presence during her 7 decades on the throne, and that she was the steady hand of a nation.
It was interesting seeing the pictures of the Queen, and that one in 1952 calling her Princess Elizabeth, because of course she wasn't coronated till 1953, and many of the papers are doing this kind of thing, taking a timeline, and I just found this rather interesting, from carefree princess to longest reigning queen. And when you look at some of the quotes that have been attributed to her, the comfort she has brought to world leaders, to subjects, to people across the Commonwealth has been so significant. And as so many commentators have said, when you look at a life like this, born in 1926, passed, of course, this year, 2022, just months after celebrating the Platinum Jubilee, the majority of this country has known no other monarch. It's just quite a poignant thing to reflect back on. And we heard from one young child, didn't we, who said that her children, more than likely, will only ever know a king as their monarch. Her Majesty the Queen, who, of course, has passed yesterday.
Time now is 7:30.
You're watching a special edition of BBC Breakfast on BBC News, remembering the life and legacy of Her Majesty the Queen, who died yesterday at the age of 96.
We will be bringing you reaction this morning from those who knew Her Majesty, those who worked alongside her and shared some of her interests in the charities she supported, the sports she loved, and the Commonwealth, which was so important to her. What
we'll try to do for you is give you an idea of how the coming days are going to play out. Of course, the UK is mourning its longest-serving monarch and also now preparing to officially welcome a new king. Our new king, King Charles III.
And one of the other things that we're able to do today is give you a sense of what people are saying about the Queen. It's one of those moments in time, and I think until the news of her death arrived yesterday, a lot of people didn't know how they would be feeling. But today, some of those thoughts are coming forward in a way we haven't heard before. At 7:31, let's go to Buckingham Palace this morning. And our correspondent, John Maguire, is there for us. Very good morning to you, John. And you are in such a good place to get a sense of how people are feeling. And it's one of those slightly trite questions, isn't it? And I think what we've already heard from you is a lot of people just felt the need to come, to go somewhere, be in a place and share an emotion.
Charlie, I couldn't have put it better myself. You're absolutely right. It's that sense, I think. There's a sense of history, of course, isn't there? The non-break in the accession of the crown. That's an important part in British history, in Commonwealth history, of course. But what I'm getting a sense of from talking to people this morning is, as you say, there's very personal reasons for coming to Buckingham Palace this morning. You can see some of the tributes here now. You'll be familiar with Buckingham Palace. There's a huge frontage gate all the way along, and these flowers are being laid in this sort of level right the way across. And many handwritten notes as well. I've been reading some of the notes, and again, very, very heartfelt, people who felt a personal connection with the Queen, most of whom, of course, will never have had the chance to meet her. We've gathered some of the people who've come here to Buckingham Palace this morning. We've got Canada, we've got Ireland, and we've got Nottingham represented here this morning. So it gives you an idea, I suppose, of the breadth of feeling. Ashley, why did you think it was important to come here today?
I was in London for an awards ceremony last night when the news broke, and it's one of those events where she's been such an intrinsic part of our life that you can't not come pay your respects to her. She is Britain, and she was Britain, and our identity is so in flux at the moment that we've now just lost that beacon that we've had for 70 years on the throne. And you know, you never meet her unless you're lucky enough to, but she's just always been a part of our lives, and now that part of our lives is gone, so it's only fair to come and pay respect to thank her for everything that she's done for us.
And is that just because she's the Queen, or was there something about Elizabeth Windsor as a person that perhaps even transcended that role?
I think there was something about Elizabeth Windsor as a lady. To say when she made her first broadcast that her whole life, be it long or short, will be devoted to us. For a 21-year-old to make that announcement, that's a big undertaking. And then to actually carry it throughout her entire life until welcoming the new Prime Minister the day before she passes away. It's just the emblem of her as a person.
Okay, very well said. Thank you very much. Miriam from Ireland.
Yes.
And the Queen, I know, was very well received when she went to Ireland. I think something like 10 years ago.
Yes.
Rebuilt many bridges that had been damaged, many relationships that had been damaged in the past. What's your personal recollection of her, your personal opinion of her?
I think she built many bridges throughout the world, but it was very important when she came to Ireland because she was the first monarch to visit since the early 20th century. A lot of water had gone under the bridge. There were a lot of mixed feelings, but I think everyone in Ireland will still remember the night she stood up at the state banquet in Dublin Castle, and her first words to the President and the guests were in Gaelic. She had touched a lot of hearts before that. She had visited the Garden of Remembrance in Dublin City. She had visited a war memorial. But that night when she stood up and spoke in Gaelic, she really touched everybody's heart.
And I think called people friends in Gaelic, I seem to remember.
Yes. Yeah, it was a wonderful night.
Okay, and what have you made of being here this morning?
Well, I'm visiting my daughter, and when I heard the announcement yesterday at lunchtime, I knew it was very serious. The palace doesn't make announcements like that. And, it's the kind of thing you remember where you were when you heard the news. And so we wanted to come this morning to bring flowers, to show our respects. It was just a wonderful feeling to be here.
Okay, well, it's also wonderful to see you. Carla from Canada, living in London, but again, you'll have known the Queen as your head of state all of your life.
I have, yeah. She's always been there. She's always been a part of, you know, what I've known.
Yeah. And tell us what she means to the people of Canada. I think as you were telling me earlier, still your head of state, but perhaps one removed from the relationship that we have here.
Yeah, it's not as close as obviously when you're in London and, you know, you're next to Buckingham and you're so involved with, you know, the politics and the royal family and all of that. So it is sort of once removed, but I think a lot of people hold her in fondness, and that, you know, there's a lot of warmth for her from a lot of people. And, you know, stuff could be said about the royal family, but you can't deny that she was so charming. And, you know, she could walk into a room and everybody would pay attention to her. And I don't think that's just because she was the Queen. Yeah.
So you feel as if her personality was perhaps even greater than
I think
being
so.
the Queen.
I
as
think so.
extraordinary as that is to think about it.
Yeah, I think, you know, she had a lot of responsibility at such a young age, and I think she carried it quite well, especially considering the way that, of course, you become royalty. It was obviously quite upsetting, but I think she carried it incredibly well.
Yeah, and important for you to come here this morning?
It is for me, yeah. I'm incredibly interested in history and things like that, so, you know, beyond, of course, it's upsetting that she's passed away, it's also a very momentous occasion as well.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you for talking to us this morning. It's been a real pleasure to meet you and to talk to you. One of the things that struck me also about being here this morning, and it's one of those spine-tingling moments, really, the fact that when a very large crowd of people makes very little noise, you can probably sense from the atmosphere in between hearing what people are saying just how quiet it is this morning. It's a sombre atmosphere, as we were saying earlier. We were here it seems like just a couple of weeks ago for the Platinum Jubilee, and what an amazing celebration that was. So many people seem to be expressing to me, certainly, the same emotions, the same feelings about the Queen, that they thought she was such a fantastic person, that they wanted to be here to mark her 70 years, on 70 years as the monarch. But obviously a very different atmosphere here, but people still, that sense of fondness, that link really, that personal link with someone who they've never met, they may never have hoped to meet, but certainly feel as if she was a huge influence in their lives. Back to you.
John, thank you very much.
In the last half hour, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, has paid tribute to Her Majesty. He's been talking to our religion editor, Aline McBall.
It feels as though, I think for probably so many people around the world, especially in the United Kingdom, that a part of our lives that was taken for granted as being permanent is no longer there. And in that sense, there is an enormous shift in the world around us, in how we see it and how we understand ourselves. And I think many people will be finding that sense of not just grief, but also uncertainty. And to some extent, a wondering about what is permanent.
And what is your message for those who are finding this an unsettling time and who are grieving for the Queen across the country and the Commonwealth?
There are two parts of the Bible that have spoken to me enormously in recent months. And I think I had this huge privilege of meeting the Queen on numerous occasions. One of them was where Jesus says, I come to bring abundant life, overflowing life. And I think in the Queen we saw overflowing life. So my first message is that wasn't just because she was Queen, it was because her feet were on an even solider rock than being Queen, which was the rock of her faith. And that's my first message. There is solidity. The Queen's sense of endurance and permanence did not depend on her, and she knew that very well. It depended on God who sustained her. And the second passage that's been on my mind is where it says, a writer in the New Testament says, despite all your suffering, you have hope stored up for you. The Queen constantly showed us the meaning of life. She was joyful, she was humorous, life was full. Even in the Annus Horribilis, as she so perfectly summed up the most difficult year possibly of her reign. Her life was full, but she never, even in bad moments, lost hope. I obviously spoke to her after the death of the Duke of Edinburgh and spent some time with her. And there was just a solidity of hope in her life. That's the second word. Abundance and hope. They are still there.
There has been a lot of talk about duty, about service. How do you reflect now on the way the Queen served the country and the church, indeed?
Oh, well, her service, I mean, if this interview were to last 6 hours, we wouldn't begin to exhaust the nature of her service. I think part of her great service that was unseen was that, as one former Prime Minister I heard saying at one point in a conversation, that there was only one person in the world that he could talk to and say exactly what he thought and felt, and was 100% certain that it would never go any further. And that was Her Majesty. I'm also absolutely sure that it will be equally true for His Majesty, by the way. And I think that that was a hidden service. She was a place of confidences and of accumulated wisdom. I talked to her last in July, I think at the beginning of July, late June. And we were talking about a particular individual. And she said, oh, it rather reminds me of, and talked about a world leader she'd met in the 1960s. And it was a perfect comparison. There was that deep sense of wisdom which was given in service of the country. But there was also just the service of her time. Hundreds of events every year which she attended. And she was the one, and again, it runs in the family. I've seen His Majesty do the same thing, who could go into a room full of people or walk down a crowded street, and everyone she spoke to felt that they were the only person there. She was never looking over their shoulders to see, is there someone a bit more interesting to see? Everybody got her attention.
So the Archbishop of Canterbury talking to our religion editor, Aleem Maqbool, just a short while ago. Now, we can talk to Aleem, who's at Lambeth Palace in London for us. You know, Aleem, it was a particularly personal tribute from Justin Welby, obviously, because he had very close contact with Her Majesty.
Yeah, and he talked a lot, as others have been doing, about not only the Queen's sort of clarity of thinking, about her capacity to listen carefully, but also about her humility, about her humour, and about her kindness as well. He called her a blessing to us all. But I was really struck by what he was saying about this sense that the Queen had accumulated so much knowledge and so much of this country's experience over the years, and that had been lost now, which was what was unsettling a lot of people. And he used a phrase in the statement he gave after Her Majesty the Queen died, that she was the person who best helped us make sense of who we are in an ever-changing world. And that was very striking in his statement, and he expanded on that. as you heard there, about times that he spoke with the Queen when she referenced people she had met years ago, other archbishops of Canterbury in the past as well. And that has been lost, but his message to those who are grieving, and a lot of people have been turning up at churches, for example, across this country, was that she was grounded, the Queen, in hope, and that's what he felt when he met her.
And Aleem, one of the things we were reflecting on when it came to the Queen's faith was that as she developed as a monarch and she took on board the various faiths across the Commonwealth and was always very mindful and respectful and curious of those too.
Yes, I mean, she said very clearly during her reign that she felt Anglicanism had a duty to protect the practice of other faiths as well, and that has been keenly felt by people of other faiths. We spoke to the Chief Rabbi Ephraim Mervis, who said that he didn't feel that he was speaking to a politician who was paying lip service to that kind of thing when the Queen said that. He felt that she really had a keen and genuine interest that went beyond her duty, and we've heard others from other faiths say similar things. I remember over the Jubilee weekend we met a man in Scunthorpe at a mosque there who welcomed the Queen. She was the first monarch to visit a mosque in the UK, and she went in the months following the September 11th attacks. And I remember him saying he was the man who presented the Quran to the Queen back in 2002. And he said at that time there was a lot of fear, a lot of division, and people in the community just wanted somebody to come along and make them feel like they were a part of Britain too. And he said that came in the form of the Queen, and he was extremely moved by that. So we are hearing that, and it's being reflected in the tributes that are being paid to the Queen, not just from the Church of England, of which she was Supreme Governor, of course, but many, many other faiths as well.
Aleem, thank you very much. Aleem McVeigh, our religion editor.
Time is 7:48. You're watching a special programme from BBC News this morning, BBC Breakfast, trying to give you a sense of what's happening this morning and reflecting, of course, on many walks of life and how people are paying tribute to Her Majesty the Queen. Let's take you now to the scene at Buckingham Palace this morning. As dawn broke in London this morning, many, many hundreds of people arrived at the palace. We've been speaking to some of them, and a lot of people just suggesting they wanted to be in a place and talk and have a moment of reflection about just what the Queen meant to them. Many people of different generations, whole families arriving there. And I think you can actually see on the railings there, of course, that official moment yesterday when that statement, the board, was put up on the gates, as it always is on these occasions. And you can see a gathering of people there, passers-by, just taking a moment for a little reflection.
As we know, Her Majesty wasn't just the Queen of the United Kingdom. She was the head of the Commonwealth, and it was a role she took extremely seriously.
We can have a look now at some of the footage which has just come in from New Zealand. These are young Defence Force volunteers performing a haka for the Queen at the Auckland War Memorial. The Maori dance, which most of us will know from rugby matches, of course, is traditionally used to honour distinguished guests or pay tribute to those who've achieved great things.
Let's go to other parts of the Commonwealth now. In a moment, we'll hear how the news of Her Majesty's death was received in India. First, let's go to our Africa correspondent, Catherine Byaruhanga in Kenya. Catherine, Kenya, particularly Kenya, held such a special place in the Queen's heart, and the country will be acknowledging and mourning her today.
Yes, good morning from the British High Commissioner's residence here in Nairobi. The flag is flying at half-mast, and a condolence book is just about to be opened where we will have the country's leaders and diplomats coming to share their thoughts on the passing of the Queen. And as you mentioned there, Kenya, it holds a special place in the Queen's life. It was here in 1952 when she had come on a tour with her husband, Prince Philip that she got the news that her father had died and she had now ascended to the throne. And it was at the Treetops Lodge in central Kenya where it said, legend goes, that she went up to the Treetops Lodge one night as a princess and then she came down as a queen the following day. Now, since then, 70 years later, we're getting reaction from people here in Kenya to her death. And so we have some of the leading newspapers. There's the Standard newspaper, and as you can see, full front page picture of the Queen. On the Standard newspaper, the Daily Nation has the same, and there it says her death marks the end of one of the longest reigns of any head of state in the world. We've heard from the outgoing president, Uhuru Kenyatta. He praised her selfless service to humanity. His incoming successor, William Ruto, praised her service to the Commonwealth. And we're seeing reaction from leaders across the continent as well. For example, one of the newest members of the Commonwealth, Gabon, the President Ali Bongo, said the Queen was a great friend of Africa and Africa showed her affection in return.
Catherine, thanks so much. Catherine Byaruhanga in Kenya.
Let's go to Arunoday Mukharji, who's in Delhi for us this morning. Tell us a little more about how the news has been reflected there.
Well, tributes have been pouring in since last night, right from Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who tweeted soon after the news of her demise came in. He even shared two photographs of his interaction with the Queen during two of his past visits to the UK, sharing a personal anecdote as well. We've also heard from the region from the likes of former President of Afghanistan, Hamid Karzai, expresses condolences, as did the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Shahbaz Sharif. The coverage in the media here has been extensive, most of them focusing on a lot of the photographs of the Queen during her 3 visits to India in the past during her reign. So you've got photographs of her at the Taj Mahal. You've got photographs of her with India's first Prime Minister. Remember, her visit to India was the first by a British monarch after India gained independence. That was in 1961. So a lot of photographs remembering the Queen, including her interactions with the public. There's also a photograph that is doing the rounds of how the Queen wrote in the visitor's book while visiting the memorial of Mahatma Gandhi, who was an icon of India's freedom movement as well. The significance really is that India is the largest member of the Commonwealth still by population. It consists of 60% of the association just by population, and the Queen's Association began in 1961 with her first visit, and her last visit to India was in 1997, and tributes continue to pour in here in the country, remembering the Queen.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Linda Yeo is Executive Director of the Royal Commonwealth Society, who is at Buckingham Palace for us. Linda, good morning to you. Just before we start, your thoughts this morning, considering how you've been working in terms of the Commonwealth.
The Queen, we were very honoured that she was our patron, the Royal Commonwealth Society, which is the oldest charity dedicated to the Commonwealth. And we have branches across the Commonwealth, as well as in Friends of the Commonwealth countries. And understandably, there's a lot of mourning, there's a lot of shock, I would say, but certainly a lot of condolences and thoughts given to Her Majesty. She was the head of the Commonwealth for 70 years, and under her time, her 70 years, the Commonwealth grew from around 9 countries to 56 countries, encompassing a third of the world's population. And I have certainly seen her dedication, especially to the young people of the Commonwealth, to promote the values she thought was most important. And I think it's that impact on people around the Commonwealth, I think that we will see in the coming days as they digest this news.
Linda, lovely to speak to you this morning, and we're seeing some wonderful archive footage from many, many years of travels. Just on a slightly different note, you'll have witnessed personally, I'm sure many, many times, the Queen's smile and the way that she engaged with people. And this could happen in a domestic setting. It could happen at a leisure centre in the UK. It could happen in a country many, many, many miles away. She had an impact, didn't she?
Very much so. I was always very struck by how active a patron the Queen was. She supported a number of Commonwealth activities. I have fond memories of meeting her on several occasions at Buckingham Palace behind me, where she would greet young people, the Queen's young leaders, selected from every Commonwealth country on the basis of their public service. I remember she stood and met every single one of them. At the time, there were 54 of them, just to acknowledge their contributions. And I was always also struck in another setting, which was the Commonwealth Service at Westminster Abbey that the Royal Commonwealth Society organizes. The engagement of her and her team in ensuring that this multi-faith service that celebrated multiculturalism, it's a semi-state occasion, really incorporated young people. We would bring in about 700 school children from all around the UK, and they were always forefront on the Queen's mind. And I think it's really that where she can Commonwealth heads of government. Just by stressing an issue in 2015 in Malta, she encouraged all Commonwealth countries to protect their forests under the Queen's Commonwealth Canopy, another project that we partnered and led on. And we achieved that pan-Commonwealth commitment this year at the Commonwealth heads of government meeting in Rwanda just in June. And so whether it's dignitaries, heads of state, heads of government, young people, the Queen's impact it's immeasurable. And by promoting the environment, by promoting service, she has done a huge amount for the Commonwealth and indeed, for us all.
And I can hear people milling around you, Linda, as it does get more busy at Buckingham Palace as people pay tributes. Just briefly, on a personal level, you said you met Her Majesty several times. What was it like?
She had an incredible smile that lit up the room. Doesn't matter how many times you meet her, it's always special. And her interest in the charitable work that I, as chair of the Royal Commonwealth Society, was doing, how our team was doing. I think I was always very struck by her interest and how involved she was in some of the projects that we delivered in her name. So I think on a personal level, every meeting was special, something to look forward to. And you just know the Queen would have had a question for you and listened intently to your answer. And I think it's her personal touch, I think, is what most of us will be reflecting on. All of us who have had the pleasure and the privilege of meeting her will certainly be reflecting on what a remarkable life, what a remarkable figure.
Dr. Linda Yeo, Executive Director of the Royal Commonwealth Society, thank you so much.
Trying this morning to reflect a little on how people are feeling this morning. We've spoken to people at Buckingham Palace who turned up, who just had things to say, spoken to world leaders too, but all sorts of people, including those from the stage and screen, have also been joining those voices.
The actor Dame Helen Mirren, who played Her Majesty in the 2006 biopic The Queen, posted on her Instagram page, "We mourn a woman who, with or without the crown, was the epitome of nobility."
The singer Dame Shirley Bassey performed Diamonds Are Forever. It was at the Queen's 90th birthday celebrations. Tweeted, "Her courage was mighty, her example iconic. She was an unstoppable force."
Fellow musician Sir Elton John said, "She led the country through some of our greatest and darkest moments with grace, decency and a genuine caring warmth."
Sir Paul McCartney tweeted simply, "God bless Queen Elizabeth II, long live the King."
Good morning. You're watching a special edition of BBC Breakfast on BBC News.
A nation mourns following the death of Queen Elizabeth II. Her Majesty died yesterday at Balmoral, bringing to an end a 70-year reign.
The Queen's eldest son, now King Charles III, was at her bedside. He'll return to London later today.
Tributes have been paid from around the world. Mourners are laying flowers at royal residences.
As you can see, crowds are gathering at Her Majesty's London home, Buckingham Palace. They're paying their respects. Thousands had gathered in the evening. Good morning. It's Friday, the 9th of September. You're watching a special edition of BBC Breakfast following the death of Her Majesty the Queen.
Britain's longest-serving monarch passed away yesterday, aged 96, at Balmoral Castle, the Scottish retreat which Her Majesty had visited since she was a girl.
The news was confirmed in a statement from the palace at 6:30 p.m. after the Queen's 4 children, including the new King, Charles III, had travelled to Balmoral.
On today's programme, we'll be remembering Her Majesty's life and legacy and speaking to those who knew and loved her.
We'll bring you the latest reaction from Balmoral to Buckingham Palace and across the Commonwealth. First, our royal correspondent, Daniella Ralph, has been looking back at the final days and weeks of the Queen's life.
The final images we have, Queen Elizabeth II still carrying out duties into her final days. On Tuesday, at Balmoral, she welcomed the new Prime Minister. These photos, the record of her last official engagement, bringing to an end 7 decades of service. Yesterday afternoon at Aberdeen Airport, several senior members of the royal family arrived to be with the Queen. The Duke of Cambridge drove the Duke of York and Earl and Countess of Wessex to Balmoral. Prince Charles, the new King, was already there with his wife and his sister, Princess Anne. Harry, the Duke of Sussex, arrived separately later in the evening. Here in the UK this week with his wife for a number of charity events, Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, did not accompany him to Scotland. At 6:30, in a statement of just 26 words, Buckingham Palace announced the Queen had died peacefully earlier in the afternoon. As is tradition, the statement was attached to the palace gates by 2 footmen, as tribute to Britain's longest reigning monarch began.
Queen Elizabeth II was the rock on which modern Britain was built. Our country has grown and flourished under her reign. She was the very spirit of Great Britain, and that spirit will endure. She has been our longest ever reigning monarch. It's an extraordinary achievement to have presided with such dignity and grace for 70 years. And with the passing of the second Elizabethan age, we usher in a new era in the magnificent history of our great country, exactly as Her Majesty would have wished, by saying the words, "God save the King."
And heartfelt words too from the leader of the opposition.
For the vast majority of us, the late Queen has been simply the Queen, the only Queen, above all else, our Queen. As we mourn her loss, we should also treasure her life, our longest serving and greatest ever monarch. Above the clashes of politics, she stood not for what the nation fought over, but what it agreed upon.
Cheered by onlookers, one of the Queen's last royal engagements was in July, with her daughter Princess Anne opening a new state-of-the-art hospice in Berkshire. But these kinds of visits had become rare over the past year, as the Queen relied on her walking stick, her mobility compromised. The royal household had tried to adapt to keep her active and visible. A golf buggy at the Chelsea Flower Show helped the Queen stay comfortable. But she had become noticeably thinner and frailer. Now, as we remember and reflect, the royal family enters a period of mourning. A state funeral is expected within the next 2 weeks. It will be a period of time when aspects of national life are put on hold. Daniella Ralph, BBC News.
Let's go straight to Balmoral this morning. The gate's now familiar to many viewers, and just to the left of the gates there, many flowers laid in tribute late into last night and again early this morning. And Balmoral, of course, is where the senior members of the royal family all gathered yesterday, including King Charles III. Our correspondent, Annita McVeigh, is there for us this morning. And Annita, it's worth remembering that at the heart of what is a story that is having repercussions all around the world, many tributes being paid. This is a story about a family who's lost a mother and a grandmother.
Absolutely, Charlie. And it, we have the continuity of the monarchy, but it must be remembered first and foremost, as you say, that we have a new king who is mourning the loss of his mother, along with his brothers and sister, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, mourning the loss of a grandmother, a great-grandmother. And, of course, many people around the UK, around the world, see the Queen as that great matriarch. And it's less than 24 hours since we heard the news that her doctors were really concerned about her health, and then the news that her family were on their way to be by her bedside, which obviously added to the concern. So much has changed in the last 24 hours, yet you have that continuity of the royal family and the duties that King Charles III must now take on. So those members of the royal family who travelled here yesterday to be with the Queen, they are still here at Balmoral. We do know that King Charles III, and doesn't that sound strange, I think, to everyone to try to get used to that idea of talking about a king rather than a queen as monarch. He and the Queen Consort Camilla will travel back to London later today. Amongst the duties that he will have are meetings with senior royal and government officials to plan what will happen over the next few days, those days of mourning. We don't know what the plans are for the rest of the royal family yet, who are here at Balmoral, but we should find more out later on today, certainly over the next 24 to 36 hours. Much more of the detail of what will happen in the coming week or so will begin to emerge.
Annita, Balmoral was, in her own words, the Queen's happy place, wasn't it? It was a place for many, many years where she and her family could have special times away from the camera. That must be a comfort for the family being there now. And many of the images people will remember are of family times, having barbecues, having picnics in the grounds there.
Yes, even from her childhood, she was talking about this place, Balmoral, as being a source of great happiness to her. It was something that was reflected in documentaries recently from other members of the royal family, saying that this was the Queen's happy place. And also the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, saying in her remarks that she hoped her family would take comfort from the fact that she spent her final days here in a place that means so much. And I think if we just look at one image of the Queen and her beloved Prince Philip having a picnic here at Balmoral, that was taken by the Countess of Wessex, released from her private album. A beautiful image of the two of them. And of course we must remember that just 3 days ago the Queen was still carrying on with her official duties, receiving Boris Johnson here at Balmoral, and then Liz Truss, and asking her to form the next government and become the UK's next Prime Minister. So although the logical brain, of course, would say that the Queen's reign would not last for much longer, given her advanced years, to think that she was still carrying out duties just 3 days ago, I think that's why people have been, well, part of the reason why people have been so taken aback by the news that emerged yesterday. And I think we can listen now to some comments from local people saying what the Queen meant to them.
Just very sad. She's been a monarch for over 70 years, and it's history, and we just wanted to be here to share our condolences to the just be part of it, kind of thing. Yeah.
It's really sad news to hear. Actually, it's that's the reason we came. We were hoping to pass on our regards, or just to be here. So it's kind of sad, actually.
A sad day. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for everybody, I think. I think the whole nation will come together and just, feel the same. Yeah.
Although you never knew her or anything, but her significance was just incredible, and it doesn't really hit home, I don't think, until you hear something like this, and what she meant to us and what she meant to the country. It was absolutely incredible legacy.
And I expect today, as we wait to hear more news about plans for the days and the week ahead, we will see more people arriving here at Balmoral to lay flowers, paying tribute to a Queen who meant so much to them, to this local community, and of course, a place that the Queen loved so well. Back to you in the studio.
No, whenever you want. Annita, thank you very much.
Now, thousands of people descended on Buckingham Palace yesterday. They wanted to lay flowers and pay tribute. More people are expected today, and our correspondent Jane Hill has been there since the early hours of this morning. And Jane, we were talking when it was dark and there were still people there determined to pay their respects, and you've seen it's getting much more busy now.
Really quite something in the last hour and a half or so, Naga. Many hundreds of people here outside the gates at Buckingham Palace. A lot of people clearly on their way to work, leaving flowers. And my goodness, I have to tell you, in the last half an hour, I had an opportunity finally to go over and stand by the gates myself, to look at some of the flowers, to read some of the messages. It was so incredibly moving, because when you actually get right up to the gates, it is almost silent. It is so quiet. Lots of people taking photos, as you would expect, but equally, so many people just standing quietly, reading the messages, looking at the flowers, and just quietly thinking about what today means. I've seen people in tears, men and women in tears. People of all generations are there. That's one of the things that really strikes you. And when you read a lot of the messages on the cards, there's a theme of essentially, thank you for always being there. That theme that we will think about and talk about so much in the coming days. One card read, "You are the only monarch I have ever known. I really thought you were invincible." And that is the point this morning, isn't it, that we are all waking up and coming to terms with. There are so many people across the UK, across the Commonwealth, who have only known one monarch. And that's really, I think, is just sinking in. It's quite beautiful, actually, when you stand at the gates there. It's really quite special. And we saw many thousands of people come here last night to Buckingham Palace. And our correspondent, Tim Muffett, was there and was talking to some of the people who wanted to come.
An event we all knew would come one day. But for so many, one that is so profoundly sad.
It's heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking.
What did she mean to you?
The Queen means everything to me like my mum means to me. She was a fantastic lady. She'll always be a fantastic lady. She'll always be a part of my life forever, and I'll never forget her.
She meant a lot to me. For someone my age, I've got quite old grandparents who were born in the 1917 and 22, so she was part of their lives too. So talking to them, they knew her growing up, and it takes a thread back to that sort of era. And now I hear people talking about a king and a coronation, and it puts conversations I had with them in my head of when they would talk about a king, a coronation. So it feels very strange to have this person that's been the head of everything in my life go.
The Maguire family are from Dublin and are on holiday in London.
Well, our two countries have been so close over so many centuries, and we've had a tough past, but it goes without saying that she was an iconic woman and a role model for women of all ages and all colours and beliefs. And my mum has been a fan of the Queen for so many years. She was a fan of her integrity, and
she's very sad. Yeah. Yeah, we shed a tear today.
Throughout her reign, Queen Elizabeth II was unwavering in her dedication to her role as monarch. And for so many people here tonight, it is vital to honour and respect the role she played in our national story.
It's very important. The Queen has done so much for us for the past 70 years, and I think that it's our kind of duty as the British people and just generally to show our respect to someone who served us for 70 years.
She means a family. Like since my boyhood, childhood,
while I was in Bangladesh, I saw her through the TV. I really do feel emotional. And as a Muslim, I prayed for her after my prayer today.
We all knew this day would come one day.
Yeah.
And yet it still feels shocking and it still feels profound, doesn't it?
Yes.
How are you feeling?
I think she's a kind of mother figure to everyone, and she was so... I can't really put it into words. As a nation, we're mourning the loss of the Queen, but for the King and his family, yeah, they have lost their mum, their grandmother, their great-grandmother, and so that's really sad for them. You know, we have to remember that she was their family.
The reign of King Charles III has begun. But for many, the reign of Queen Elizabeth II will never be forgotten. Tim Muffett, BBC News, at Buckingham Palace.
And as people continue to arrive here at the palace, just as they did last night, I was chatting to some of the people who'd brought flowers. And one young woman, she said, this was not my queen, but I wanted to bring flowers because I wanted to show my respects. And she explained that she lived in London, but she was originally from Taiwan. But she said, I had such enormous respect for the Queen. And in particular, she pointed to the fact that she was so hard-working, and the fact that only a few days ago, as we saw, she greeted the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, and this young woman and the person she was with, who was from Brazil, and he said, not my queen either, but I had enormous respect for her, and we had to be here this morning. We had to come and pay our respects. And that just gives you a sense of what we're hearing from people who are coming down this morning. And as I say, many, many crowds expected here over the course of the day, and I'm sure in days to come. The new king, we know, returns to London at some point today as well, so we will have more from here at the palace. For now, Naga and Charlie, back to you.
Jane, thank you very much. And as Jane said there is an expectation. We have been indicated that King Charles III will return to London. The timetable, nothing yet has been clarified, but as we get that, of course, we will bring that to you.
Now, Buckingham Palace, as you've seen this morning, very much a focal point of national mourning for the Queen. But there'll be cities all across the UK who will be making their own plans. Let's go to our Midlands correspondent, Navtej Johal, who's outside Leicester Cathedral for us this morning. Navtej, thank you very much. A lot of places will be trying to work out just what to do and how they allow people to pay their respects. Tell me about plans there.
Yes, absolutely. A book of condolence is going to be opening here at the Cathedral and at Leicester Town Hall later today. But this is a city, like most across the UK and many across the world, which is in mourning. It's a place which had a deep level of affection for the Queen. It's where 10 years ago, in 2012, she began her Diamond Jubilee tour. And I was here just a few months ago nearby at the St Matthew's Estate for the Platinum Jubilee celebrations, and that's a place where people from around the world have come to make their home in Leicester, and hundreds of them had come out for a big Jubilee lunch on a rainy afternoon to pay their respects, to celebrate the life of the monarch. The last time, however, the Queen was here was 5 years ago for Maundy Thursday. She came to Leicester Cathedral and she was greeted on that day by the Bishop of Leicester, the Right Reverend Martin Snow, who joins me this morning. Thank you, Martin. Martin, just begin by telling me a little bit about your personal recollections of the Queen, because you've actually spent time with her in Sandringham, as well as meeting her at the palace and here as well.
Yes, I was very privileged to be able to greet her when she arrived here in Leicester for the Maundy Thursday service at the Cathedral. But on a personal level, yes, I was also invited for a weekend at Sandringham with the Queen and Prince Philip as well. An extraordinary weekend in all sorts of different ways. My memory of it in particular, playing cards with the Queen, quite extraordinary, really.
What was that like?
So she taught me how to play patience, a very particular form of patience that she often played when there were lots of guests around, I think. And when I admitted that I didn't know how to play it, she indeed taught me. So that's a memory that will live with me long. But also, while I was there, I had to preach at Sandringham Church in front of the Queen and many members of the royal family as well. That was quite a scary experience, I have to say. But because she was such a person of deep faith, we were then actually, after the service, able to have something of a conversation about that as well.
Just on that point, how much do you think her faith informed the type of monarch she was, the way she carried out her duties?
I think her faith was incredibly important to her. in all sorts of different ways. So she often expressed in her Christmas messages about how her faith carried her through many difficulties in life. I think it was part of her reason for wanting to visit so many places of faith around the country, a way of trying to draw people together and remind us of what unites us in this country. And yeah, her faith actually inspired her, I think, in terms of, you know, her role and her sense of duty as well. So it was very real to her.
And Martin, many people across the country, across the world, feeling a deep sense of grief and sadness at yesterday's news. As somebody who deals with that regularly, how would you console them? What would you say to them in terms of helping them through that grief?
I think the most important thing is to say that we all have our own ways of expressing our grief. It's not the same for everybody, and for some people it'll be laying flowers in a very public way. For others it'll be much quieter, and I think I'd want to say in particular that our churches stand ready really for people to come and visit, to just simply have a time of quiet, to sit whether alone or with others. And we have a special service in fact happening tomorrow evening at 6:30, St Mary de Castro Church here in Leicester, which is a very, very simple opportunity for people to come together to express their grief in a way that is appropriate to them.
Okay, Martin, thank you. And that service, just one of the ways in which Leicester is marking the passing of the Queen, along with the Book of Condolence here, which opens later today.
Navtej, thank you very much.
Now, the author and broadcaster Gyles Brandreth first met the Queen in 1968. He got to know her through his friendship with the Duke of Edinburgh. And we can talk to Gyles now. Good morning, Gyles. A very, very sad day. A day many expected to come, but I think just anecdotally getting so many emotional reactions that so many people didn't quite expect.
It's strange, isn't it? It's very moving to be here outside Buckingham Palace. Windsor and Balmoral, I think, were the Queen's favourite homes, but this Buckingham Palace here in London is the headquarters of the family firm. And the Queen was the head of that firm for 70 years, 7 months and 3 days. I mean, the longest reign in our history. But more than that, I think people from across the world are here. If you walk in front of the palace, you meet British people, but people, international people, and so many broadcasters. This is world news. The Queen has represented the United Kingdom to the world impeccably for as long as almost all of us have been alive. She was extraordinary. And it wasn't simply because she was the Queen. I think it was the nature of her personality. People who I've been speaking to by the palace, the one word that comes most frequently to their mouths is respect. People just had so much respect for her, for the dignity with which she carried out her duties right to the end. Extraordinary. Age 96, meeting her 15th British Prime Minister. When you remember that her first Prime Minister was Winston Churchill, who was born in 1874. And her most recent Prime Minister, Liz Truss, another Elizabeth, born in 1975. A span of 100 years. Extraordinary.
Gyles, when you look, and I'm sure you've heard, as many people have done now, tributes from world leaders and from prime ministers who say that wisdom she brought to the table in a very subtle, understated way in their meetings when she'd chat, sat alongside an ability to beam a smile at people, no matter who they were, and make them feel special. It was an extraordinary balance of skills and character that she had.
That smile was electric. As the Queen grew older, she was conscious that her face sometimes looked a little bit grumpy unless she was smiling. So she did flash that smile, but it was unbelievable. It really could light up a room. Her smile was incredible. You saw it in that picture taken only on Tuesday of her, looking rather impish, looking up, clearly an elderly, frail person, and yet with a twinkle in her eye. She had a wry sense of humour. I think the only thing that wasn't on public display as much as it might have been over the years was her great sense of humour. Never malicious, but it was worldly wise. And she did indeed. She delivered one-to-one with all the world leaders that she met, as the ambassador for the United Kingdom, as the head of the Commonwealth, somebody who knew everybody, who literally had met every world leader, every United States president from President Truman onwards, who literally had known everybody and had experienced everybody. She never expressed particular admiration for people, even if you tried to test her, though I think she had a particular respect for Nelson Mandela, because, as she said, he endured what he did in prison and emerged without rancor. She was a person who had no rancor. She was gracious, she was good, she was an example to us all. She was the best of us, and I think, therefore, brought out the best in us, as we can see today.
Giles, I'm interested in the way that different generations are thinking about the Queen, because there'll be veterans of the Second World War, people from that generation who have one version of how they knew her and their respect for her, and then there's children now who saw her with Paddington Bear very, very recently. There are so many places and moments in time where she has become clearer to a different generation.
It is incredible. People like my grandchildren were asking me yesterday about the Queen. Who was she? What was she like? And of course, they can only picture her as a very old lady. But people of my generation, my parents' generation, she was a girl when they first got to know her, and how beautiful she was too. So I think there's a sense of the void that we now feel. There is also a sense for everybody of reflecting on their own lives. My mother lived to be 96 years of age, and you do think about your parents, your grandparents, because she fulfilled, in a sense, that role for all of us. Her life, in many ways, is the story of our lives, and it is. She was a different person for different generations. But my goodness, didn't she do well to keep in touch? She could actually I know she could do a fist bump. She was in touch with them. You know, she didn't like mobile phones at the dining table, but she did know how to work one. And to see her with Paddington Bear just this last summer, only a few months ago, was a complete enchantment. I think that she wouldn't have minded being an actress. I once had a conversation with her about Windsor Castle, when she was happiest there. She talked about the war, and when she appeared in Christmas pantomimes, and said she rather enjoyed being a principal boy. Maybe, yes. Well, I said, would you like to have been an actress? Well, maybe. And we could see it at the end of her life, what a brilliant actress she would have been.
She was superb. Giles, you know, it's so interesting. You all know there'll be tributes being paid, and you go through the periodicals and the magazines and the newspapers, and the biography is clear. The timeline of what she achieved and did in her life is very clear. But many questions about who she actually was, and one of her roles, which she kept very, very strict adherence to, was privacy. It's very rare to actually know who the Queen was, personally.
That's the fascination, in a way. Of course, the famous Victorian constitutionalist always said, do not let daylight in on magic. And the Queen was conscious that she was a public person, always dressed in those bright, clear colours so that you could see where she was. She was on display. As I think it was actually Queen Victoria who said, you have to be seen to be believed if you're the sovereign. But she certainly was seen to be believed. But she didn't let, as it were, her private life go into the public area. And she didn't give interviews. But when you were with her, she was very much herself. She was very unaffected. She was very easy to be with. I say that, but of course she was also the Queen. And there was always an invisible moat around her, because nobody ever treated the Queen quite normally. For her, I think the loss of her mother and her sister and then her husband, the three people who could simply treat her as a woman, that was very considerable for her, because nobody ever else was entirely normal with her. Her children, of course, but even they would bow or curtsy to her at the beginning of each day. I'm conscious standing here that I first came here as a very little boy at the time of Queen Mary's death, which was in 1953, in the run-up to the coronation that year. And Queen Mary was something of a role model to the Queen, very dignified. She was the widow of King George V. And King George V, the grandfather of the Queen, really gave the Queen her early lessons in kingship. And when Queen Mary came to greet the Queen after the death of Queen Mary's son, King George VI, before she hugged her daughter and kissed her, she curtsied to her, saying, you know, I must greet you first as my queen and then as my granddaughter.
Gyles, it's lovely to hear your stories this morning, and I'm so delighted that in amongst the clear emotions that there are for many people, and of course, first and foremost, for the royal family themselves, there's a period now coming up, isn't there, what, 10 days or so, when people are going to be of mixed emotions. They're going to have their thoughts about the Queen as well as they're going to be able to smile and laugh, as you have, about the impact she's had over the years.
You must. The Queen was 96 years of age. That's a long life by anybody's standards, and she filled it absolutely to the brim. Still on duty, age 96, on Tuesday, not just greeting the new Prime Minister, saying goodbye to the last Prime Minister, but also she gave out an honour that day to her Communications Secretary. So she was very much on duty right to the last. So an extraordinary life, lived to the full, and a Christian life. For her, her faith was absolute. I mean, driven by duty, as we know, sustained by faith, made happy by her dogs and her horses. It was a good person leading a good life. So while we feel the sadness, we feel the personal void, we must feel for the new king and his sister and brothers and their children. We very much feel for them as people. But at the same time, we can celebrate the most remarkable reign of somebody who has represented the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth with such consistency, dignity, honour, grace and good humour over so many years. Completely remarkable.
Gyles, thank you very much.
The time in the UK is 8:33, and for our viewers in the UK, it's now time to get the news, travel and weather where you are. Now, the front pages of all the major UK newspapers are leading with tributes to Her Majesty today.
Let's start with an image from the Daily Telegraph, reprinting the Queen's own message of condolence to the families of the victims of the 9/11 attacks. Grief is the price we pay for love, the quote they use. US President Joe Biden referenced the comment in his tribute and recalled how she stood in solidarity with the US in its darkest days.
Sometimes the simplest words are the most powerful, and the Mirror has two. A profile picture of Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II, and the words, "Thank you."
Let's have a look at the Daily Mail. Our hearts are broken, says the paper, with a portrait of the Queen from 1952 while she was Princess Elizabeth. It's interesting how the papers have chosen images from different eras in her life. And looking through many of the papers this morning, there are so many pictures to choose from. One of the paper's columnists, Sarah Vine, says, our grief is 100 different emotions, all of them hard to grasp.
The Guardian is featuring a portrait from the Queen's coronation, a picture that has been used widely across many of the newspapers, particularly those around the world.
Yes, one of the things really getting a sense of this morning in our coverage is the impact of the Queen's death as people have paid tribute to her. This, the image from the Herald Sun and the paper there saying irreplaceable. There are so many images to choose from. In fact, that smile, and we were talking about it just a moment ago, I think for many people, that image of the beaming smile is one of the really enduring images.
And the front page of the New York Times describes the Queen as the spirit of Britain. The paper says the Queen was an enduring presence during her 7 decades on the throne, and that she was the steady hand of the nation. You know, it's very interesting seeing which images have been chosen. And that smile, you'll remember with the Platinum Jubilee celebrations, which, of course, I mean, not just in this country, but around the world, people were celebrating. There was that wonderful vignette, that video the Queen did with Paddington Bear, where they shared their love of marmalade sandwiches.
That's right.
And that smile literally lit up the screen, didn't it?
So what we're trying to do this morning is give you a real sense of reaction. So there is reaction internationally, there's reaction from world leaders, from former prime ministers as well. But right alongside that, and very importantly, we're getting the reaction of regular people who are turning up, for example, this morning at Buckingham Palace. We'll be hearing more of their thoughts throughout the morning.
And we'll also keep you up to date in what's going to be happening in the hours and days to come. Good morning. The time in the UK is now 8:37. You are watching a special edition of BBC Breakfast on BBC News, remembering the life and legacy of Her Majesty the Queen, who died yesterday at the age of 96.
We'll be bringing you reaction this morning from those who knew Her Majesty, those who worked with her, shared same interests, also in the charities she supported and the sports she loved, and, of course, the Commonwealth, which was so important to her.
We'll give you an idea of what will happen over the coming hours and days. The UK, of course, is mourning its longest-serving monarch, whilst also preparing to officially welcome the new king, King Charles III, who, we understand, will make his way to London today.
We'll also show you what's been happening this morning as people across the Commonwealth and all over the world and the UK come together to express their sorrow and pay tribute.
Now, one of the focal points of mourning yesterday, when the news broke at 6:30 p.m. UK time, was Buckingham Palace, where people gathered in their thousands to mourn the Queen and pay their respects. And a similar emotion is being felt this morning, one perhaps less of shock, one perhaps more of reflection. Let's talk to Jane Hill, who's at Buckingham Palace for us. Jane, you've been there and you've seen how the mourning has developed and the atmosphere has built.
Yes, and a noticeable increase in the number of people filing past the railings at Buckingham Palace, Naga, this morning. Hundreds and hundreds of people, and those flowers, bouquets of flowers, that pile just continues to grow. And when I spent a little time over there half an hour or so ago, it was really striking, reading all the messages. And if you had to distill those messages into one simple phrase, it is thank you. And a lot of references to longevity as well. People making reference to the fact that you are the only monarch I have ever known. And that is why it is so quiet over there, actually, and such a sober, quiet, but respectful mood. Let's discuss all of that and everything that the nation is going through with the Daily Mail's Robert Hardman, who is with me here at Buckingham Palace, author of Queen of Our Times. Robert, I know you spent some time looking at the tributes as well. It's incredibly moving, isn't it?
It's very moving, Jane. I mean, it is the manifestation of one of the Queen's most favourite quotes and most famous quotes, which is grief is the price we pay for love, and that is it right there. And I mean, I looked at a lot of those messages this morning. Two things struck me. One is the number of them that come from families. This is very much a pan-generational reaction. Whole families have come here and want to say thank you. And lots of references, very sweet, a lot of cards with Paddington on them. I don't know if you noticed that. Yes. A reference, of course, back to that extraordinary Platinum Jubilee. I think that really struck a chord.
Yes, only 3 months ago we were all here celebrating in bright, bright sunshine.
I think for a lot of people that would be, that's obviously the last time they saw the Queen on the balcony over there, that balcony that she has stood on more than anyone in its history. I mean, first appearance on that balcony as a baby or child in 1927, and there she was, just as you say, this summer. And I mean, that was such a powerful moment, and I think it sort of helps. I think it helps us sort of come to terms with this, that she has just been this constant, and this reaction just underlines how much she meant to so many.
And one of the cards said, I really thought you were invincible. that is what the nation and the Commonwealth is having to adjust to. We all now have to get used to saying the King.
Yes.
If you're my age, a lot older than me, you've never said the King, you've always said the Queen. And that's the new reality that people now have to adjust to.
Absolutely. I mean, on the one hand, it was sort of unthinkable and it was inevitable, and we have to sort of get used to that. And yes, I mean, the last people to stand up and sing God Save the King, they were the wartime generation. And obviously, you have to be well over 70 to remember anybody else on the coins or on the stamps or on the TV on Christmas Day. I mean, she's just part of the national, international landscape, and I think that's reflected in extraordinary outpouring right around the world today, because of course pretty much anyone, everyone of any stature in the post-war firmament came here, came to Buckingham Palace to meet her, to be entertained by her. I mean, the list goes with de Gaulle and Reagan and Mandela, her great friend Nelson Mandela. I mean, you just see all modern history has happened right there, thanks to her.
Yes, and this by no means her favourite residence. We know how happy she was in Windsor and in Balmoral. Yeah. But this, the heart of it, inevitably, the capital, the seat of government, that is just the way it is. And we stood here for the state visit of the Obamas, for example, in more recent memory, and that sweep of history.
Yeah, absolutely. But she never wanted to live there. I mean, when she came to the throne, and it was as much of a shock in '52 when she suddenly found herself 25-year-old mother of two. She was then living at Clarence House and wanted to stay there. It was Winston Churchill, my goodness, Churchill, her first Prime Minister, who said, no, I'm afraid monarchs live above the shop, and she had to move to Buckingham Palace and move to HQ, because it is Royal HQ, and as you say, it's not her favourite house, but I mean, it's definitely the place where it's the sort of the seat of power and of the monarchy. But yeah, I mean, all those memories that come flooding back when you look at that building of happiness and sadness. And whatever triumph, adversity, she was always there.
And the many, many conversations that will have been had within those walls, my goodness, wouldn't we like to know some of the things that were said? And I'm thinking particularly of political, state leaders, because discretion and dignity, in fact, they were words that I read on some of the tributes on the railings as well. And the Queen, who always kept her counsel. We didn't know her political views. I'm sure she's met prime ministers and presidents that she liked enormously, and some that she didn't. Yeah. And wouldn't we like to know? But we can only surmise.
We can only conjecture. I mean, it is extraordinary to think. You know, she's had 15 UK prime ministers, but we forget that she's had. I mean, I tried to add it up once. The number of prime ministers she had in all her realms, because at the moment she's head of state of 14 other countries. But it was getting on for 200, and I kind of lost count when you add in her Australian and her New Zealand and her Jamaican prime ministers and all the others. And yet all their conversations have remained confidential with her. I mean, it's amazing to think her very first state visit was the old King of Sweden back in 1954. Her last state visitor was Donald Trump in 2019. But all those in between have come here, and it's remarkable how, for them, no matter how great or grand or historic they might have regarded themselves, it was always a very big deal to come here to meet the Queen. She was just this unique presence on the world stage. And I think that's why right around the world today, we're not just hearing the sort of usual formalities after the death of a head of state, we're hearing really heartfelt tributes.
Absolutely. Robert Hardman, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. We will be talking again in coming days, I'm quite sure. But we've been reflecting on the number of people arriving and the tributes that are being laid there. Let's cross back to John Maguire, who's been talking to people today who've been bringing their tributes. John.
Jane, there's something very moving, actually, quite spine-tingling about being surrounded by so many people, and there really are very many people here now at the gates of Buckingham Palace, but it being very quiet. It's a sombre atmosphere, as we've been saying all morning. People have been saying the same sort of things to us as they said here when there was a great sense of celebration earlier on in the summer with the Platinum Jubilee. They talked about how their love for the Queen, their admiration for the life of duty that she'd endured. But as you can see now, all of the floral tributes placed behind me, as you were talking about, some heartfelt, some stretching to one side of A4, others just very simple. That one there says, "Forever our Queen." You can see this lady here just taking a photo. Let's talk to some folks who've turned up this morning to pay their respects, to visit. They'll all have their own reasons why. Denisha and Shiv, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Beautiful bunch of yellow roses there.
Yeah.
Why did you come this morning?
So the Queen just basically signifies England and Britain, and it's like a personal loss for everybody. In our family, we lost our grandma earlier this year, and it's like they're just a family going through the same thing. Somebody's lost their grandma, someone's lost their mum, someone's lost their great grandma. So we thought we'd just go and pay our respects. And my grandma's favourite colour was yellow, so I bought some yellow roses for the Queen.
That's wonderful. Those flowers will be laid in just a second. And Shiv, to you, a sense there, I think, from Denisha, of the woman behind the crown, as it were. What did the Queen mean to you?
Yes, definitely. So obviously she was always in the limelight.
So for me, she was always there. She was a figure that you could look up to. She was always well behaved, and she was early monarch in most of our lifetimes. So I just come to pay my respects.
All right, good to see you this morning. And Trish, that's right, isn't it? For the vast majority of people watching this morning, just looking around, for almost everybody here, she'll have been the only monarch we've known thus far.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. And everybody respects her and loved her, and that's why we're all here to pay homage to her and say our goodbyes, really. Very sad day, very sad, but I wanted to be here. So, yeah, so here I am, along with everybody else.
And you're on your way to work, I think, but have taken a diversion, is that right?
Yes, I better get into work in a minute, but yeah, I'm on my way to work, so yeah, but I thought I couldn't not come.
No,
So-
feels like a moment in history, doesn't it?
Of course it is, yeah,
absolutely.
definitely.
And to Tanya and George, welcome to the UK. Visitors from overseas, from the United States, from Virginia.
Yes, from Virginia.
And you got a chance, I think, not necessarily to meet the Queen, but to see her at close quarters when she visited a few years ago.
That's right. In 2007, Virginia was celebrating its 400th anniversary, and we invited the Queen to come help celebrate with us, and she did. And I was part of the group that put together the ceremony at the Virginia Capitol for her. I worked in the Virginia Capitol, and my wife was there in the crowd and was able to be very close to the Queen, as was I, but she had a special moment with the Queen.
The Queen wanted to speak with someone in particular. It was Oliver Hill, and he was a noted civil rights leader, and she thanked him for his incredible service, and I thought it was very poignant, as she was such a woman of honor and duty and service herself. It was truly lovely.
She is much beloved in Virginia, and we just wanted to be here to pay our respects.
And people, when you talk to them who'd met the Queen, would say that she was always very well briefed, was very personable with people, that would make you feel as if you were the most important person in the room. Did you get a sense of that when she was talking to your friend?
Absolutely. She made everyone light up, and you felt like you were the star, even though clearly she was. So she was quite amazing and remarkable in that way, of someone of such stature to make everyone feel welcome and adored.
All right. Folks, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to have one more quick word with Denisha. We were saying again, the only monarch that we've known in all our lives, and her personality to me, and judging from what people have been telling me, seemed to transcend the job, the big job.
Yeah.
Is that how you felt?
Yeah, so Britain, if you think of the United Kingdom, you think of the royal family, but especially the Queen. She's everywhere. She's on our stamps, she's on our biscuits, she's on bedding. So, yeah, it's going to be sad that her face isn't going to be everywhere anymore. But obviously, with the new era, there's a new king, and hopefully good things, and a different Britain coming.
Folks, thank you very much indeed for talking to us this morning. Fascinating to hear your views. Fascinating, I think, isn't it, to hear from people, everyone who's come here today, whether they're just passing through, whether they've made a special journey. We've spoken to many people this morning who've got up at 4 o'clock in the morning to be here today. They'll all have their own motivation, their own reasons for just coming here, perhaps laying a bunch of flowers, perhaps lighting a candle, writing a note, but having just that moment of reflection. And that is because I think there was always a personal link between the Queen and with people. They might not have had the privilege to meet her during their lives, but they certainly feel as if she was a big influence in their lives and touched their lives too. And that's very much a sense of what we're hearing at Buckingham Palace here this morning. Back to you in the studio.
John, for the moment, thank you.
Now, Her Majesty died at her beloved Balmoral, but she had spent most of the last 2 years at Windsor Castle, which is where Duncan Kennedy is for us this morning. And Duncan, morning to you. Having walked around Windsor, I know that the people who live there just feel such an affinity. I mean, it sounds so odd, doesn't it? The Queen just lives down the road, round the corner, but she has done for the last couple of years, and obviously held a very special place for those people who do live in Windsor.
You're absolutely right, Naga. I mean, this castle, Windsor Castle, is right in the town, and it feels like part of the community. A few years ago, I was here on the Long Walk, which is where we're standing, this elegant boulevard that stretches up to the statue of King George III. And a car came down the Long Walk, and we stepped out the way. It was a Jaguar, and lo and behold, it was the Queen driving. There was another man sat next to her, presumably her detective, and she sped off to the road that joins the Long Walk here, turned left, and went off to whatever engagement she was heading for, perhaps a lunch somewhere. It was remarkable to see her that she wasn't always surrounded by motor rider, outdrivers, police escorts, all that kind of thing. She lived something of a normal life here at a place that I've described as the home office. Whereas Buckingham Palace was really the office home, here it was much more a place where she could relax in the 13 acres of Windsor Castle and of course the surrounding Windsor Great Park. It was a place she loved to ride horses, to watch polo, to take part in the Royal Windsor Horse Show, all these kinds of things that she couldn't do in London that she could do here in Windsor. I'm actually standing at the Cambridge Gate, which has become the lay-down point for flowers and for people's notes. And it's where people have, in a sense, burst into a kind of subdued activity. People come to pay their respects, to stand, to look, to reflect. People who are curious, people who are passionate about the Queen. Others just want to see what's all going on. Two of those are Steve and Nicola Brown, who've joined us here, come across from Wokingham, just down the road here. Nicola, why have you turned up this morning?
We just wanted to come and be able to share our grief and just be with others and just feel that closeness, as you said, to this. You love this place, and we would often come down here and not always see her, but you know, you just felt that closeness that she was here.
Steve, what does she mean to you?
I think she's a very important part of our lives. She was a great leader. She set a great example, and she served the country. You just want to feel that you can give something back.
Got a very brief story for us about you actually very close to the Queen not long ago.
Yeah, when it was her 90th birthday, we came down to join in the crowds, and a friend had told us that she liked yellow and white flowers, and so we, with some friends, we bought some yellow and white flowers, and my friend was holding them out, and she made a beeline for them, and she came over and spoke to us, and we were just sort of in awe, and I was just blown away by her just beautiful smile. She was just so lovely. And I can't even remember what she said, but it was just a sort of moment that I just thought, oh my goodness, this lady who's just so amazing.
What a lovely memory. Steve and Nicola, thank you very much indeed. Just two of the people who've come here today, old, young, local people, tourists, all come to pay their respects and mourn this woman who's been described as very special by those we've met this morning.
Duncan, thanks very much. Duncan Kennedy for us at Windsor.
Now, the Queen was the patron of hundreds of charities and community organisations, but one of her most long-standing links was to the Women's Institute.
She joined it in 1943 when she was still Princess Elizabeth and served it for the next 8 decades.
Well, the WI's national chair is Anne Jones, and very pleased to say Anne joins us from Buckingham Palace. Good morning to you, Anne. I just want to, first of all, your thoughts this morning.
It's sadness, I think, that the overwhelming feeling is that we've lost such an amazing woman, an epitome of everything that the WI stands for, just a genuine, inspiring woman. And standing here in front of Buckingham Palace, seeing the grief, seeing the flowers, seeing the tribute to her, just puts it all into perspective.
Anne, can it possibly be true that I'm reading in my notes here that the Queen only missed 4 or 5 WI meetings in all the time she was a member? Is that true?
It is. I believe it is true. Yeah, I can't be certain on that sort of fact, but she was dedicated. She was dedicated to Sandringham WI in Norfolk. And made sure that she was there for the January meeting every year. And as you say, it was only a handful that she managed to miss in all that time. But it just so shows her dedication to the whole country, not just the WI. You know, when she took her oath, she pledged that she would be serving her country until her very last day. And that is what she did.
And Anne, good morning, it's Naga. What would the Queen have been doing at these meetings?
She would have been doing exactly the same as every other WI member, enjoying the company of fellow members, listening to whoever was the guest speaker of that day, and taking part in discussions about our campaigns and what the WI was standing for at that point in the year. So she would have been involved just like any other one. And when you met her, and I had the privilege of meeting her at the annual meeting, the centenary annual meeting in 2015, and she was so well informed about everything that the WI did, and passionate about everything that we stood for. During the pandemic, she adapted the way that she communicated with people, how she met people, and just showed that she was willing to change, just as the WI has had to change in our 100 years.
Anne, I think it's a very rare and privileged thing to be able to say you've met the Queen, and we've had guests on this morning remembering their experiences. And if you wouldn't mind, how was it? What was it like meeting the Queen in 2015?
I felt completely overwhelmed, I must admit. I almost forgot to curtsy. It was just that feeling of being incredibly nervous. But she was so good at putting you at your ease, and she made you feel very much that she wanted to speak to you. At the time, I was chair of the Federations of Wales and was interested in the work of Wales. A truly amazing, inspiring woman.
It's really interesting, isn't it, Anna? I think you mentioned this already. On the one hand, you have continuity. A lot of people are saying that this morning. She's always been there. That reassurance, even if you didn't realise it at the time. And yet, just like the WI, someone who was able to change over the years and adapt and relate to different people of different generations.
I think that's so true. And here this morning, it just made me think of that again, because paying tribute here at Buckingham Palace are the young, the very young, and the older generation. So she really did manage to cross all generations, and I think it was because she lived with the times that she was in. Obviously, coming to her reign in the 1950s was a completely different world to 2022 when she came to the end of her reign. So that ability to adapt and change is a real strength of hers.
And Anne, just briefly, we mustn't forget we've had a Queen for 70 years, and the WI, began by encouraging women to get involved to produce food during the First World War. It was part of the suffrage movement. It was about women being empowered.
It was, and I think having a leader like the Queen, who just proved that women can be incredibly good leaders, women are at the forefront of any issues that affect the country, like the energy issue at the moment. Women will be the first to feel the effects of that. And she just showed how a strong woman leader could make everybody's lives better. And we in the WI are incredibly proud of her. And we'll carry on her legacy because she has left a wonderful legacy. And I'm sure that the royal connection will continue because the Queen Consort is a member of the WI.
Anne Jones, National Chair of the WI for England and Wales and the Islands, thank you very much.
Let's just take a moment to look at the images from Balmoral, of course. Members of the royal family gathered there yesterday, and what we've witnessed throughout the morning this morning, and you can see them there, the many, many flowers and tributes that have been presented just outside the gates of where the royal family are still gathered this morning.
And we will keep you up to date throughout the day on what will happen in the coming hours and days. Good morning. You're watching a special edition of Breakfast on BBC News.
A nation mourns following the death of Queen Elizabeth II. Her Majesty died yesterday at Balmoral, bringing to an end a 70-year reign.
The Queen's eldest son, now King Charles III, was at her bedside. He'll return to London later today.
Tributes have been paid from around the world. Mourners are laying flowers at royal residences.
Crowds are gathering at Her Majesty's London home at Buckingham Palace and are paying their respects. Good morning. It's Friday the 9th of September and you're watching a special edition of BBC News following the death of Her Majesty the Queen.
Britain's longest-serving monarch passed away yesterday, aged 96, at Balmoral Castle, the the Scottish retreat, which Her Majesty has visited since she was a little girl.
Gun salutes and church bells will ring out across the UK today as the country begins to mourn. The new King, Charles III, will address the nation this evening.
On today's programme, we'll be remembering Her Majesty's life and legacy and speaking to those who knew and loved her.
And we're going to bring viewers here in the UK and across the world, including PBS in the United States, the latest reaction from Balmoral to Buckingham Palace. First, our royal correspondent, Daniella Ralph, has been looking back at the final days and weeks of the Queen's life.
The final images we have, Queen Elizabeth II still carrying out duties into her final days. On Tuesday, at Balmoral, she welcomed the new Prime Minister. These photos, the record of her last official engagement, bringing to an end 7 decades of service. Yesterday afternoon at Aberdeen Airport, several senior members of the royal family arrived to be with the Queen. The Duke of Cambridge drove the Duke of York and Earl and Countess of Wessex to Balmoral. Prince Charles, the new king, was already there with his wife and his sister, Princess Anne. Harry, the Duke of Sussex, arrived separately later in the evening. Here in the UK this week with his wife for a number of charity events, Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, did not accompany him to Scotland. At 6:30, in a statement of just 26 words, Buckingham Palace announced the Queen had died peacefully earlier in the afternoon. As is tradition, the statement was attached to the palace gates by 2 footmen, as tribute to Britain's longest reigning monarch began.
Queen Elizabeth II was the rock on which modern Britain was built. Our country has grown and flourished under her reign. She was the very spirit of Great Britain, and that spirit will endure. She has been our longest ever reigning monarch. It's an extraordinary achievement to have presided with such dignity and grace for 70 years. And with the passing of the second Elizabethan age, we usher in a new era in the magnificent history of our great country, exactly as Her Majesty would have wished, by saying the words, "God save the King."
And heartfelt words too from the leader of the opposition.
For the vast majority of us, the late Queen has been simply the Queen, the only Queen, above all else, our Queen. As we mourn her loss, we should also treasure her life, our longest serving and greatest ever monarch. Above the clashes of politics, she stood not for what the nation fought over, but what it agreed upon.
Cheered by onlookers, one of the Queen's last royal engagements was in July, with her daughter Princess Anne opening a new state-of-the-art hospice in Berkshire. But these kinds of visits had become rare over the past year, as the Queen relied on her walking stick, her mobility compromised. The royal household had tried to adapt to keep her active and visible. A golf buggy at the Chelsea Flower Show helped the Queen stay comfortable. But she had become noticeably thinner and frailer, something that severely and reflect the royal family enters a period of mourning. A state funeral is expected within the next 2 weeks. It will be a period of time when aspects of national life are put on hold. Daniella Ralph, BBC News.
Well, we can see this morning the gates outside Balmoral, and what we've witnessed throughout the morning is a steady stream of people arriving and just laying flowers, spending a moment reading some of the inscriptions there and the tributes to the Queen. Of course, our colleague Annita McVeigh is there for us this morning. And what we know, as all the royal family are still gathered there, this was a very special place for the Queen, wasn't it?
Absolutely, Charlie. And let me just pick up on what you were mentioning about those floral tributes. First of all, looking at the messages, one says, just thanks. Another says, God bless, amazing lady. Another has the words of the poem, My Heart's in the Highlands, attached to the bouquet. And a little earlier I was talking to one couple who were making their way up to the gates here behind me to leave a bouquet of flowers. They were holidaymakers from the USA, and they said they wanted to be here in person to pay tribute to the Queen. They said they had always admired her grace, her sense of duty and her service. And we know that Aberdeenshire Council is going to be laying on some shuttle buses today to bring people from local towns like Ballater and Braemar who want to come here and pay their tributes to the Queen. So we expect that floral tribute that's been growing since the news emerged yesterday of the Queen's death to grow throughout today as well. And of course this place, Balmoral, has always held such a special place in the Queen's heart. Even as a child, when she holidayed here, she talked about how happy it made her to be in Scotland, to be here. And that was something that family members of the royal family said in recent documentaries about the Queen, that this was her happy place, the place where she could be free, she could breathe, relax with friends and family and her beloved dogs, of course, walking, driving around the area. And she was very much a well-known and well-loved figure to people in this part of Scotland. I think we can just show you a really lovely image, one taken by the Countess of Wessex, which you may have seen before, of the Queen and Prince Philip having a picnic here on the Balmoral estate, looking incredibly relaxed, I think you'll agree. And it's also amazing to think that just 3 days ago, the Queen was still carrying out her working duties here when she had that audience with Liz Truss, asking Liz Truss to form the next government and become the next Prime Minister of the UK. And I think that has added to a sense of surprise. I mean, yes, she was 96 years old. We knew that her health was deteriorating, and the logical mind would say it would not be long until the Queen passed away. But I think there is a real sense of surprise because we saw that photograph of her with Liz Truss just 3 days ago, carrying out her duties, looking frail, but very much still that working royal, very much displaying that sense of duty that she has shown throughout her reign. And we've been hearing from people in the area their reflections on the Queen.
Just very sad. She's been a monarch for over 70 years, and it's history, and we just wanted to be here to share our condolences to the just be part of it, kind of thing. Yeah.
It's really sad news to hear. Actually, it's that's the reason we came. We were hoping to pass on our regards, or just to be here. So it's kind of sad, actually.
A sad day. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for everybody, I think. I think the whole nation will come together and just, feel the same. Yeah.
Although you never knew her or anything, but her significance was just incredible. And it doesn't really hit home, I don't think, until you hear something like this, and what she meant to us and what she meant to the country was absolutely incredible legacy.
You get a real sense, don't you, from speaking to people there, just what she meant. A lot of people asking this morning about the movements of the royal family. What happens in terms of the steps in the next 10 days or so? And, of course, King Charles III. What do we know about the coming days?
Yeah, well, I think, Charlie, we're going to find out a lot more about the coming days, perhaps later on today, because King Charles, as we now know him, he will return to London with Camilla, the Queen Consort, later today, and we know that he will have, amongst a number of duties, meetings with senior royal and senior government officials to plan the days ahead, these days of mourning, of course, leading up to the state funeral for his mother, the Queen. We know that Prince Harry, who came here yesterday along with other immediate members of the family, he has already left Balmoral this morning, and we expect the new king and the Queen Consort to leave here a little later to return to London. And, just, I think, reflecting on less than 24 hours, the Queen's eldest child came here as Prince Charles. He will leave as King Charles III. For the moment, back to you.
Annita, thank you very much.
Thousands of people went to Buckingham Palace yesterday to lay flowers and pay tributes. More are expected today. Our correspondent Jane Hill is at Buckingham Palace. And Jane, you know, at moments like this, it's often sad moments like this for the whole nation, but it's often a privilege, isn't it, to witness how we all behave and to just see how we pay tribute, because there is almost a collective grief and recollection of fond memories, fond images we have of the Queen.
Oh, it feels like a real privilege to be standing here at Buckingham Palace today. Naga, 3 months ago, so many of us were here or watching it on television, all the celebrations that were right here for the Platinum Jubilee, the Queen who came out on the balcony behind me to that enormous cheer from the crowds. The beautiful weather, the celebrations. Today here we stand and reflect on how much has changed in those 3 months. There is one element that is the same, though, because if what we were all doing, or what so many people were doing over that Platinum Jubilee weekend, was saying thank you to someone who had served for 70 years, it's really striking. If you go and take a look at the flowers and the many messages on them here, there is, again, that similar sentiment. People essentially saying thank you. You were always there. You have always been here. And it is that continuity. And that is what is the shock, I suppose, to the nation, to the Commonwealth. There are so many people waking up to this news today who have known no other monarch. And now we all have to learn to refer to the King and not to the Queen. And for so many people, that is something unusual. It is new, and it is its own kind of shock. And again, what we said at the time of the Platinum Jubilee, I interviewed plenty of people over that period, I'm sure you did too, who might have had certain views about the monarchy, might have wanted there to be an element of reform, perhaps an element of slimming down. But my goodness, the one thing that came through time and again throughout that period was there was something different about the Queen, because of her dignity, her longevity, the fact that she never stopped working. And some of the people I've been speaking to who've been laying flowers here at the palace today have said just that. One of them made reference to the fact that she was working just 2 days ago when she saw the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, at Balmoral. So people continue to come here to stand silently, to pay their respects, to lay flowers, just as they did last night. And our correspondent Tim Muffett was amongst the crowds here outside the palace yesterday evening.
An event we all knew would come one day. But for so many, one that is so profoundly sad.
It's heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking.
What did she mean to you?
The Queen means everything to me like my mum means to me. She was a fantastic lady. She'll always be a fantastic lady. She'll always be a part of my life forever, and I'll never forget her.
She meant a lot to me. For someone my age, I've got quite old grandparents who were born in the 1917 and 22, so she was part of their lives too. So talking to them, they knew her growing up, and it takes a thread back to that sort of era. And now I hear people talking about a king and a coronation, and it puts conversations I had with them in my head of when they would talk about a king, a coronation. So it feels very strange to have this person that's been the head of everything in my life go.
The McGrath family are from Dublin and are on holiday in London.
Well, our two countries have been so close over so many centuries, and we've had a tough past, but it goes without saying that she was an iconic woman and a role model for women of all ages and all colours and beliefs. And my mum has been a fan of the Queen for so many years. She was a fan of her integrity, and
she's very sad. Yeah. Yeah, we shed a tear today.
Throughout her reign, Queen Elizabeth II was unwavering in her dedication to her role as monarch. And for so many people here tonight, it is vital to honour and respect the role she played in our national story.
It's very important. The Queen has done so much for us for the past 70 years, and I think that it's our kind of duty as the British people and just generally to show our respect to someone who served us for 70 years.
She means a family. Like since my boyhood, childhood, while I was in Bangladesh, I saw her through the TV. I really do feel emotional. And as a Muslim, I prayed for her after my prayer today.
We all knew this day would come one day.
Yeah.
And yet it still feels shocking and it still feels profound, doesn't it?
Yes.
How are you feeling?
I think she's a kind of mother figure to everyone, and she was so, I can't really put it into words. As a nation, we're mourning the loss of the Queen, but for the King and his family, yeah, they have lost their mum, their grandmother, their great-grandmother, and so that's really sad for them. You know, we have to remember that she was their family.
The reign of King Charles III has begun. But for many, the reign of Queen Elizabeth II will never be forgotten. Tim Muffett, BBC News, at Buckingham Palace.
And some of the people in Tim's report there talking about how they cried a tear or two as they looked at the tributes at the gate, and I've certainly seen that here this morning. When you stand over there and you stand at the gates, it is incredibly moving, and it is very, very quiet. This part of the area around Buckingham Palace is actually very noisy at the moment because of all the preparations that are being made, the scaffolding that's being put up for the days ahead. So it feels like quite a cacophony where we stand, and it is so striking when you stand at the gates and realise that there are people just standing very quietly with their memories, with their thoughts, reading the cards that people have attached to their flowers. And I've seen men and women in tears, and what's really striking as well is the difference in ages. I mean, there is every generation there standing at the gate, just with their own thoughts and memories. From here at Buckingham Palace, it's back to you, Naga and Charlie.
Jane, thanks very much. We're having some more information coming through about the official period of mourning and guidance from the palace as well. Jane there was mentioning that floral tributes, of course, you could see have been gathering at Buckingham Palace. Now, members of the public are going to be guided to lay floral tributes at dedicated sites in London, at Green Park or Hyde Park. Flowers which are left outside Buckingham Palace are going to be moved to the Green Park Floral Tribute Garden by the Royal Parks, and further guidance will come through.
Yes, a lot of people asking about what information is coming directly from the royal family this morning. Just a couple of other things that are just coming to us here. This is the message. Following the death of Her Majesty the Queen, it is Her Majesty the King's wish that a period of royal mourning be observed from now until 7 days after the Queen's funeral. We don't know yet the date of the funeral. The date of the funeral will be confirmed in due course. Royal mourning observed by members of the royal family.
And royal household staff and representatives of the royal household on official duties, of course, together with troops. Now, we do understand today, and various pieces of information will be coming through, royal salutes will be fired today at 1 p.m, and they will take place at London's Hyde Park and at the Tower of London. And also, I mean, you would have seen flags flying at half-mast. They were half-mast yesterday, and they will remain half-masted until 8 o'clock on the morning after the final day of royal mourning. And as Charlie said, royal mourning will be observed by members of the royal family and various households on official duties for a period from now until 7 days after the Queen's funeral.
So I think we can see, actually, the flag at Buckingham Palace. There we are, flying at half-mast. We're going to go to Downing Street now. Our correspondent, Nick Eardley, is there for us this morning. Good morning to you, Nick. We're just hearing a few details about some of the events, the moments that will be happening over the coming days. A lot more information, of course, will emerge, including, of course, the date of the funeral itself. But in many ways, politics is sidelined for a moment in time.
It absolutely is, Charlie. You might be able to see behind me
The members of the Cabinet are arriving just now for a special meeting to discuss what happens over the next week or so. It's quite remarkable, though, to think of all the political developments we've seen in the last few years, a lot of the turbulence that's been going on in that building behind me. The Queen was a symbol of continuity throughout all of that, and in the tributes we've heard already over the past few hours, that's really come through, particularly from the Prime Ministers who served under Queen Elizabeth II. We've heard a lot of them talk about just how much detail she was across. She was very knowledgeable. Theresa May, the former Prime Minister, has been saying that when she held talks with the Queen in that weekly audience they would have, the Queen knew what was going on. She'd thought a lot about the issues of the day. Likewise, John Major, another former Prime Minister, gave a bit of an insight into the Queen's personality. He's been saying that a lot of those meetings were filled with humour and amusement. It's incredible, really, when you think that the Queen's first Prime Minister was Winston Churchill, someone that was born in the 1870s. The sense, I think, here is that somebody who has been a bit of a rock through difficult times over the past 70 years has been lost. And we will hear some more of those tributes this afternoon in Parliament. From noon, senior politicians will pay those tributes in the Commons and in the House of Lords. Those tributes will continue tomorrow in Parliament, and senior politicians will also have to pay tribute and an oath to King Charles III. A remarkable moment, really, in the history of this country when you think that we have a new Prime Minister. Liz Truss was only made Prime Minister by Queen Elizabeth on Tuesday. We now have a new monarch as well, something that's never happened in British history. Those two things happening within a week, a real sense of the change that's happening at the very top of the British state.
Nick, now one of the things that a lot of people have been talking about is that relationship between the Queen and Prime Ministers over so many years, and the wisdom and the engagement that she had over the years and how much she was able to help them. We're hearing more about that, aren't we?
We are. We never get the exact details, Charlie. There's always an agreement that whatever's discussed between a Prime Minister and the monarch isn't revealed publicly, but we are getting a flavour of what those meetings were like. There's always been a sense, I think, from Prime Ministers that they enjoy those meetings because it's a chance to have a frank conversation about what's going on in the country. Boris Johnson, when he paid tribute to Queen Elizabeth ahead of the Platinum Jubilee, talked about exactly that, how she had seen it all throughout her reign, how she was deeply knowledgeable about what was going on, not just here in the UK, but across the world, across the Commonwealth. He talked about how she would often have remarkable knowledge of small details about things like the capital cities of obscure countries that perhaps were seeing some political events at that time. And the other thing we've heard from the Prime Ministers who've been paying tribute to Queen Elizabeth over the past few hours is just that sense that it was quite a friendly circumstance. The audience was a chance to have quite a relaxed talk in what can be a pretty challenging job. So I think we will hear a lot more of that over the next few hours, that sense of the Queen being a rock in quite often difficult political times.
For the moment, thank you very much.
More information is coming through as to what will be happening in the coming hours. What we can tell you now is that royal salutes will be fired at 1 p.m. today in London's Hyde Park and the Tower of London.
Also, information from Buckingham Palace that people are being invited to lay flowers at many of the royal residences.
You're watching BBC News. It's 26 minutes past 9 in the UK, and you are watching a special edition of BBC Breakfast on BBC News. Thousands have been gathering outside Buckingham Palace to pay their tributes to the Queen, who has died at the age of 96.
John Maguire is there for us this morning. And John, give us a sense of the people you're talking to there, and we've watched as you have more and more people arriving throughout the morning.
Yeah, you're right, Charlie. It's getting really very busy indeed here now, and something really has struck me about being here all this morning, and that people are saying the same things to me today about the Queen, about her 7 decades of duty, her 70 years of service, as they did just a few weeks ago during the Platinum Jubilee celebrations. The admiration for her is extraordinary. You can see some of the tributes, the floral tributes, but also the handwritten notes as well. The regard in which the Queen was held is quite something, actually. Real heartfelt sentiments expressed in a lot of these notes. So they're saying the same things about the woman herself, but of course the atmosphere is entirely different. The Jubilee was one of joy. Today is a sober atmosphere, and there are thousands of people here, people as far as I can see, but it's actually really quite quiet. Jenny's come along this morning to lay flowers. Good morning to you, Jenny. What did the Queen mean to you?
Well, she was almost the mother of the country, really. I mean, my parents were the Queen's generation, and so it feels like she was all our mothers and grandmothers rolled into one, really. And she's just always been there. You know, she's the glue that's held this country together for my whole life and most people's whole life.
And when you think about the history, not only of Britain but of the world,
well, exactly.
Throughout the war
exactly.
and beyond, such tumultuous times.
Absolutely. You know, she saw it all, didn't she? She saw it all, and that was a special generation. Whether you were the Queen or my mum and dad, she was part of that special generation, which we celebrated, didn't we, a couple of years ago?
Yes.
Yeah, and it just feels a moment where this is coming to an end, really.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time this morning, Jenny. All sorts of different generations here today. Hannah and Amanda with these two, who, of course, won't know a Queen Elizabeth in their lifetime. They'll only know a King Charles, won't they? Whereas the rest of us, almost all of us here, probably have only known the one monarch. You have some lovely pink carnations there to put down. Why did you feel it was important to come today?
My granny was a huge fan of the Queen, mad fan, so she brought us up respecting and loving the Queen. So I think for her, this is important.
So you're, and we've heard that a couple of times this morning. You feel as if you're laying them not only for yourself, but for her?
Yeah, definitely. She was a huge royalist, and just we all respected them because she respected them so much. So it was lovely.
And why do you think, particularly the Queen, I think, seems to have just struck a note with so many people's lives? Why do people feel that personal connection to her?
I don't know. She just came across as a lady and really respectful to everybody, which I think everyone appreciated her being respectful to everyone, and that was just lovely about her.
Right. I think friends or sisters or?
We're friends.
Friends. Right.
From the same mum's group, actually.
Okay, right, with these two.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Lovely to see you here this morning. You brought flowers as well.
Yes, yeah.
There's so many floral tributes.
Yeah.
Why was it important for you to come?
Same as Amanda, my granddad actually, he was British, and he lined the streets when King George died. So I guess it's also for my granddad and my grandparents. So I'm Australian, and my granddad emigrated to Australia in the 1950s, so it's for him.
So the Queen was your head of state,
yes,
of course, as well. So a slightly different relationship to us. But
yeah, absolutely. I think Australians still have a affinity with the Queen, and yeah, I think we're still very proud to be part of the Commonwealth.
All right. Well, it's lovely to see you here today, and the next generation, as I say, that will grow up with King Charles III over the years to come. As I say, it's extraordinary to stand here. You know, these floral tributes will build and build and build throughout the day. You can see the crowds just coming here, and a sense, I think, in between what we're saying of the solemnity, the somberness that people are feeling, but of course I think the overriding emotion is one of thanks, of gratitude really for the service that Her Majesty gave for those 70 years, 7 decades on the throne. There are all sorts of people here from right around the world, some bemused tourists perhaps, but who understand exactly who the Queen was, what she meant to the people of this country, what she meant to the people of the Commonwealth, and perhaps more widely too, what she meant to people from right around the world. Back to you two.
John, thank you very much. So let's go straight to Balmoral. And John was talking about the number of people who have been arriving this morning and laying flowers. This is the scene, of course, the royal family still gathered at Balmoral this morning, having rushed there during the afternoon yesterday. And what you can see is many, many flowers that have been laying there. We've seen people just arriving. Some people out walking their dogs who've just passed by. And the tributes that have been laying, I know those who've been close by have read some of those tributes. And they're very heartfelt because Balmoral was a place that was very dear to the heart of the Queen. She'd been there for so long. And many of the locals had seen her and spoken to her over many, many years. And
we'll take you to the other end of the country, back to London, and talk about what's happening in Westminster at the moment. The UK government's cabinet is meeting currently in Downing Street, and we understand that as ministers have been arriving and have met, the only subject being discussed is their tributes to Her Majesty, to Queen Elizabeth II, who, of course, died. And we are getting more information as well about what will happen today, later on. And we understand that at 1 o'clock there will be a tribute. Royal salutes will be fired in 2 places in London, in Hyde Park, by the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery, and at the Tower of London by the Honourable Artillery Company. And what that will involve is 1 round will be fired for each year of the Queen's life. And, of course, she died yesterday at the age of 96.
Well, no British monarch reigned for longer than Her Majesty. And in world history, only one monarch, Louis XIV of France, was on the throne for longer. He reigned for 72 years.
Let's take a moment now to explore the historical context of Queen Elizabeth II, how she'll be remembered by future generations, her place in history. Kate Williams is a royal author and professor of history and joins us now from Buckingham Palace. And Kate, we have spoken many times with you on this programme about the Queen. And today we're going to be talking about her legacy. For you, what would that be?
What an incredible reign. When you think she was born in 1926, when not all women had the vote, came to the throne in 1952 when we didn't have a female train driver or bank manager, and has lived through World War II, the 50s, the 60s, into the 21st century, and seen the world change in so many ways throughout her reign. Globalisation, technology, the end of the empire. And for the Queen, what I think was her guiding principle, it was 2 things. Firstly, the importance of service. She pledged when she was just 21 that her whole life would be dedicated to your service. And even in just earlier this year, when she wrote a message on the eve of her anniversary of accession about Charles's future, she signed it, "Your servant, Elizabeth R." She always wished to focus that she was here to serve. And secondly, she wished, after seeing the horrors and the strains and serving, of course, in World War II, she wished to pursue the principle of peace. And really thinking about her state visit to the Republic of Ireland in 2011, when she said with great effort and real commitment, peace can be achieved. And that, I think, when she wished to look back on her reign, trying to keep together the idea of unity and peace. And I think when historians of the future look back 100 years' time, they look back on the Queen's reign, they really will see this as the high watermark of monarchy. She's had so much influence, travelled all over the world, 42 times around the world, she has so much influence, been so discussed, and we will never see a reign like this again. It really is the end of an era.
And Kate, when you talk about her sense of duty, which goes right back to the beginning of her reign, and then you fast forward to just a few days ago, and that image of her continuing with her duties at Balmoral, welcoming the new Prime Minister.
Yes, it really is incredible to think that just a few days ago she was welcoming Elizabeth Truss and she said goodbye to Boris Johnson. We might speculate that she probably didn't feel too well, but she still was determined to get up and do her constitutional duty. And of course there was a message sent on her behalf on Wednesday to sympathising with a tragedy in Saskatchewan. The Queen really has focused on her duty right until the very end, and we were always asked if she would abdicate, and I always said she never would, and here she is, right, really working at constitutional duty, and she was determined to do it. And I think really that shows her ultimate commitment that started, as you say, when she came to the throne, but it was always within her. As soon as she realised she was going to be Queen, when she was just a 10-year-old, thrust into this new world, when her uncle abdicated, her father became king, she was determined to do her duty and to serve.
And Kate, I mean, historically, how do we remember her? You know, 15 prime ministers, a change in the formation of the Commonwealth, a change in Imperial Britain. She's presided over so much, but she was always willing to change, wasn't she?
Yes, we've talked a lot, I think, over the past day about how the Queen has been a constant through a great period of change. As you say, the end of empire, countries fighting for independence, and also the globalisation technology, the fact that when she came to the throne, most of us didn't have a telephone or a TV or a car, and very few of us had travelled abroad, and now we are a very different globalised nation. She is a world monarch as well as a British monarch. The whole world is talking about her. And that change, she's not just been a constant, she has embraced it. She was the first ever televised coronation, issuing out her TV speeches. It was seen as a newfangled medium, television. Everyone thought, why is the Queen doing this? And she knew it was a way of getting her message across. And she has embraced change, and she has changed with it. And that, I think, really shows how she has gained both respect and affection. When she came to the throne, everyone said, well, she's a workhorse, she'll be respected but not loved. And she has been both. She's been respected and loved. And just think of some of the most the joyous moments of her reign, when we thought she was perhaps jumping out of a helicopter just before the Olympics, and when she met with Paddington, in the film of her with Paddington for the Platinum Jubilee, how joyful the Platinum Jubilee was, and how just before the Platinum Jubilee she was opening the Elizabeth line and discussing about how to Tom about Oyster Garden. You're just showing here her knighting Major Tom in the middle of the COVID pandemic, how meeting Donald Trump, all she's done and all she's been there steadfast. In the COVID pandemic, she addressed us, talked about how we would meet again, and really we always expect her to be there, and she's there at great moments of British history to speak to us, and yet this is a great moment of British history, and she is not here.
Kate, thank you very much for your time this morning. Good to speak to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Her Majesty died at Balmoral, but she had spent most of the last 2 years at Windsor Castle.
Duncan Kennedy is there for us this morning. Duncan, we've been at Buckingham Palace this morning. We've been at Balmoral as well. What is evident already is that many people want to go to these places. They want to express one way or another how they're feeling this morning.
That's exactly right, Charlie. It's that sort of impetus that people have within themselves to do this. You can either do these things at home, watch it on the television, listen on the radio, watch online, or you get that urge to move and to go and do something. And that's what's happening with all these people here behind me. It's become a crowd of the curious, the interested, the fascinated, many people bringing flowers. It's a lay-down spot for bouquets, for notes, for elderly, for young people, for local people, for tourists. Many hundreds of people now gathering at this spot. It's called the Cambridge Gate. It's on one side of Windsor Castle by the Long Walk, and really the number of flowers here keeps growing throughout the course of the morning. Two of those who've been part of that curious set are Salia and Kalsoom, who join me now. You're both from this area, the Ascot area generally. Salia, why have you come? What's the purpose of your trip here?
I felt I needed to come here and pay our respect. We are local and we've been here. We were here for the Queen Jubilee, Platinum, and we just felt that, we needed to be here.
Kalsoom, why did you come today as well?
Again, we're local to Windsor, so we're here quite a lot on the Long Walk, and we feel like the Queen represented Windsor. She lived here, she loved it here, and we feel her loss today, so we wanted to come and mark our respects.
What does she mean to you as a person, as a woman, as a monarch?
Well, she was a strong lady, she was a great role model, and she was always smiling. So yeah, she I looked up to her, admired how she handled her role as a monarch.
Salia, you have family in Pakistan that you've spoken to, and they're deeply affected by this.
Yeah, they are. Obviously, it's my mother, my father, they're there at the moment, and they're really, really emotional. I think it's affected all different generations. Queen has been part of our life. And she represents the UK. So, yeah, it's going to be different.
I think your mum and dad were almost saying they might change their plans.
I know, they will come back to a new monarch. So, yes, it's going to be different.
This is intergenerational. You're talking about your parents there. You're obviously much younger.
Yes.
Why do you think she had this kind of appeal?
I think I remember when my grandmother was alive and she lived in Pakistan, I remember seeing Diana's funeral on telly with her. So I think everybody around the world has been part of the royal family and seen them evolve and grow. We were here actually, both of us were here for Harry and Meghan's wedding.
Yes.
We were here at the picnic in summer.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been part of our life. Yeah.
Kelsey, what about that intergenerational thing? You're obviously a lot younger than your parents.
Yes.
Why do you think she has this cross-generational, cross-everything appeal?
Yes. Well, I think our parents have experienced the Queen in a different way and to us, and that's all we've ever known. And now my daughter is 7, and she's learnt about the whole royal family at school and the Jubilee this year. So everyone's affected by this. So yeah, it affects a lot of people.
Sally, that includes your 6-year-old son.
I know, yes. My son, he's 6 and he goes to school here in Windsor. And he was so sad last night. He didn't want to go to school in the morning. He kept asking me, so who's going to be our queen? And I'm like, we have a new king. So obviously children, they don't understand. But yeah, he was very sad in the morning.
Sally and Kalsoom, thank you very much indeed. Just 2 voices amongst many here. We've spoken to dozens of people this morning, all reflecting that. Different ages, whether they're local, whether they're from other countries, that sense of how important the Queen was, how intergenerational was, how inspirational she was, a strong woman, a strong leader, somebody who was above politics, who could talk to various types of people, from presidents to ordinary people, in the same way, without humiliation, without any kind of affectation. And you can tell by those people here who we've just spoken to just how emotional and how trying this day is for people to come to terms with this news, the passing of this remarkable woman.
Duncan, thank you very much.
It's been just 3 months since the UK enjoyed a 4-day weekend to celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, marking 70 years on the throne.
There were street parties, parades, red arrows fly past, and a rock concert at Buckingham Palace. And, of course, unforgettable moment with Paddington Bear.
Can you imagine the person who managed to persuade the Queen to be part of that, who wrote that sketch envisaging the Queen as part of that? Well, that was Frank Cottrell-Boyce, and he joins us now from Liverpool. Frank, you know, I think what you did there, you know, all throughout the last few hours, we've been reflecting on the Queen's life. And obviously, when the Queen first came to the throne, she was very remote, as a monarch is. But it's moments like that that have made younger generations mourn her equally, with equal sadness today. I mean, that was something you did.
Well, I mean, first of all, I don't want to take too much credit. I certainly did not ring up the palace and say, I've got this great idea. I think, well, first of all, I co-wrote it with John Foster and James Lamont, who write Paddington. But also, I think it's important that idea, I think the idea is model dress. And you can really see that there, you know.
Frank, I mean, you're someone who professionally deals with stories. The story of the Queen's life is quite extraordinary, isn't it?
It's amazing. I mean, I was talking to my cousin last night who pointed out that by the time my parents were in their 20s, they'd seen 4 monarchs. But I'm old and I've only known one. You know, it is amazing, that ability to kind of to be there actually, and to embody, to empty yourself out and to allow the nation to embody the best of itself in her person. It's all about character, isn't it? It's about the affect that she has. If we've learned one thing the last few years, it's how important character is. And she really was a strong, willing servant. You know, she knew why she was doing it.
Do you know, Frank, there was also that James Bond scene, which you were part of. You wrote that. And so I see why you had the confidence, at least, even though you had your doubts about the Paddington scene. There was that, who throws the Queen out of, you know, off a building? How on earth did you come up with that?
Well, first of all, the idea wasn't mine. The idea was Mark Tilsley, who was the designer for the Olympic opening ceremony. When he brought it in, we all went, well, we'll never pull that off. And then nobody had a better idea. And Tracy Seward, who was the producer, went to the palace to ask permission to find out she said, this will be a really boring meeting. Nobody needs to come with me. I just need permission to find out what she's wearing on the day and take some photographs so we can build, a location that looks a bit like it. And the Queen's dresser, this remarkable woman, Angela Kelly, said, oh, why are you doing all this? And she said, so that we can kind of make it look as though it's the Queen. And she went, oh, the Queen wants to do it. And Tracy came back and everyone, what? So she put herself up for that. She was game. She wanted to be in that sketch. And in fact, on the day that we were filming, she said to Danny Boyle, I think I should have a line. So she bagged that line. There wasn't a line in the script. She improv'd.
It's marvellous. We were talking to Gyles Brandreth, and he said he thinks secretly she may have wanted to be an actor. I think she had it in her, don't you?
Oh, she had a lot more lines in the Paddington sketch, partly because it was a lot cheaper to film her than it was to film Paddington. But she had a lot more lines, and didn't she deliver them brilliantly? And she, with evident enjoyment. And as I said, that wasn't an easy task. Paddington's not really there. That's technically an amazing performance, actually. A brilliantly timed comic performance.
Well, Frank, it's been lovely talking to you this morning. Thank you so much. And it's been lovely to be able to smile about those very special moments that the Queen delivered for so many people. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And we'll get there. Nation will get there, won't they? We've mentioned this morning that the Queen was the most filmed and photographed woman in the world.
One of the photographers who took a picture many times was Ian Lloyd, who joins us now from Windsor Castle. Ian, very good morning to you. I wonder, first of all, for many, many years, you took pictures of the Queen. What are your thoughts this morning? As the news sank in yesterday, everyone has their own moment, don't they? What are you thinking?
Yes, it's there are so many moments for me, and I think everybody will be thinking of their one time that they met the Queen or seen the Queen drive past, or mine would be meeting her in Russia. There was a press reception and getting to talk to her, and remembering those dazzling blue eyes and the fact that she focused all her attention on you for just a few moments, very politely, I think. And there's moments like that. But photographing her, there are certain restrictions. One is that you can't ask the Queen, or you couldn't ask her to do anything. You just had to take your chance. So if she stood in the wrong place, you couldn't correct that. So there's always a bit of a lottery, I think.
Ian, good morning. Share with us your favourite images.
Hello, Naga.
Hello. Your favourite images you took of the Queen.
Yeah, there's a few that I selected. One is on a train, looking out of a train window. Have you got that one? That was at Rugeley, and the funny thing was she waved goodbye to all the, the great and the good, and just a few yards down, the train broke down. It just refused to go, and the Queen was laughing her head off out through the window, because when things go wrong, it was a great laugh for her. Everybody else, you or I might find things irritating if we're late, but things like the lift breaking down, or the little girl that falls over giving the flowers, something that goes wrong, she always thought was very funny, and that was definitely a memory for me, I think.
Ian, talk to us about the relationship she had with the people she met, because we've heard some wonderful tributes from people, and often they talk about the smile, that engagement, that ability to make people feel special, just for one moment in time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's down to perfect manners. She always would approach people and just, as I say, for maybe a second or two, say something to them. Quite often it was the same thing. Often at an investiture she would say to somebody, it does give me great pleasure to give this to you. And people remember and they like that kind of thing. And the great thing is, something like an investiture, she would say the same three questions to, say, Elizabeth Taylor, who got an award, but equally the Lollipop Lady, they would get three questions as well. So she wasn't, she made sure everybody got their time with her, and she knew that they'd want a memory, so she would try and say something like that would make them, give them a memory to take away,
It's such a precious thing to be able to capture, Ian. As you're well aware, those special moments, as you referred to, of the one of the Queen on the train, But her smile, that's something that's been spoken about so much.
Yeah, she had a very sort of instant smile. She wasn't an actress like her mother. Her mother would smile all the time, even if it was bucketing down with rain, she would be smiling, the Queen Mum. But the Queen was very, quite often very serious. She called it her Miss Piggy face in the 1980s. But when she smiled, it was delightful, and it really did transform her. She had a beautiful smile. She didn't just smile with her lips. She really lit up, you know, her eyes and everything. And she was dazzling when she smiled. And then equally, then she would go back to being formal again, you know, a bit dutiful. But so it was quite a good moment if you could get her to smile, definitely.
Ian, really good to talk to you. I'm sure, you know, it was a privilege to be able to photograph her. Ian Lloyd, royal photographer, thank you for joining us.
Let's go to our cameras in Balmoral now. Annita McVeigh is there. Annita, you've been watching many people leaving their tributes this morning.
Absolutely, Charlie. From dog walkers to toddlers and tourists, a steady and growing stream of people arriving here at the gates of Balmoral to leave those floral bouquets, many of them with messages attached. I had a look a little earlier. One simply said, "God bless, amazing lady." Another said, "Just thanks," and one had the Robbie Burns poem "My Heart's in the Highlands" attached to the bouquet, because of course the Queen's heart very much was here. We know that it was her happy place, a place she had come to since childhood, where she spent part of her honeymoon and where she holidayed every summer. So as the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, reflected in her remarks, she hoped that the royal family would take some comfort from the fact that the Queen had spent her final days here in a place that meant so much to her. Prince Harry, of course, was one of the immediate family members who arrived here yesterday. He has already left today, and we expect that King Charles, because of course now we must get used to the idea of having a king, not a queen, King Charles III and the Queen Consort Camilla. We expect them to leave Balmoral a little later to return to London. Although he is mourning the loss of his mother, he must also undertake all of these constitutional royal duties now that he is king, and that will include a meeting with the Prime Minister. It will include a meeting with senior royal and government officials to plan the days ahead. And he arrived here, didn't he, as the eldest child of the Queen, as Prince Charles, and he will leave here today as King Charles III. So much changing in less than 24 hours. And I think as people look back to just 3 days ago, when they saw that photograph of the Queen greeting Liz Truss, asking her to form the next government and to become the next Prime Minister of the UK, I think that is contributing to the slight sense of disbelief at her passing. Yes, she was 96 years old. Yes, we knew that her health was not the best. We had heard about mobility issues, but then came that message from her doctors yesterday that they were concerned about her health. That concern grew as members of the royal family came here to Balmoral, but we saw her right to the end carrying out her duties. Back to you in the studio.
Annita, thank you.
Of course, full coverage will continue on BBC News of this poignant and historic period for the UK, the Commonwealth, and of course, the world.
Tributes to Her Majesty will be heard in Parliament and in St Paul's Cathedral. Church bells will peal and gun salutes will sound. The floral tributes will continue to grow in towns and cities across the UK.
The new King, Charles III, is going to make his way to London to give his first formal address as monarch and as the eldest son of the Queen, leading the nation in mourning the death of his mother.